Hey, Steele Watchers, it is mine and especially Eric's favorite time once more.
No! No!
Shush,
No!
shush.
No!
It is, as you can tell from the screams of torture, it is time for us to start thinking about our top 5 episode for season 3. So, as
Our
always,
top 5 episodes episode.
Yes, exactly. That's how it sounds. That's what I meant. So as always, we welcome and encourage everybody else's contributions as well, because otherwise it's just the two of us talking. And I mean, like, we do that enough. So if anyone wants to submit their top 5 episodes of season 3, please do so. You can send them to the email. That's probably the most preferable spot to send them, so we can just compile them and make a list. And yeah, we will read them. Let us know whether or not you want us to say your name when we read it or not. And
what name you want us to use. If you want to be introduced as Lord Darth Vader. Okay.
I had a student who wanted to be called Batman once, so I did. So yeah, please send us your top 5s so that we can stretch out the episode and pad it. No, I'm serious. Like, we can include it with quality content.
Yes.
That's pretty much all I had to say.
As opposed to what we normally do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome to SteeleWatching, which is a podcast for Remington Steele fans. My name is Sara, and I am bursting with fruit flavor. I don't know.
Okay. Juicy fruit gum?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm Eric, and I'm not bursting with flavor. So I don't know what that makes me. Just like the chewed up
flavor.
gum with no flavor stuck to the bottom of the chair. I don't know.
It's been that kind of week.
Oh, it's been that kind of a week. Trust me, it has been that kind of a week.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. Anyway, enough about my ups and downs.
Yeah, so for this episode, we're going to be talking about Season 3, Episode 14, Have I Got a Steele for You? Or as I like to call it, the end of the freeze. Thank God.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
It's been kind of thawing a little bit for a while, but okay.
But yeah, this is this episode is kind of interesting because I sometimes... Having rewatched it, I remember, I really like this episode, but it's always one that I not forget, but just forget some of the parts of it, because like there's a lot of this episode that I really, really enjoy, and there's other parts of it that I just kind of like blank on, which ironically, the thing that I usually blank on is the fact that this episode is the episode that ends the freeze, because the stuff that I usually remember from this one anyway is Mulch and the Courtney Doll plot line, which I really enjoy. Yeah. So it's kind of funny that the end of the freeze is sort of like stuck in there, and I kind of, when I'm rewatching it, going, oh yeah, this is the episode where they did, where they finally thaw out. Huh, okay. But yeah, I wrote down both the sorry, I didn't say Have I Got a Steele for You, which first aired on January 22nd, 1985, and this one was written by Jeff Catch That Carrot Melvoin and directed by Christopher Hibbler. So both
Jeff,
names we're
going to talk here in a few minutes. Seriously, we're going to have a talk.
Are we?
Oh, yes.
Are we going to talk to Jeff? You got Jeff on the line? Cool. So I've got the TV guide synopsis and the DVD liner notes. And the reason why I wrote both of them down was because I felt like the DVD liner notes kind of gives a better description, but I found the TV guide synopsis kind of curious because it mentions George Mulch. So the TV guide synopsis says, idea man George E. Mulch is back with a new business venture that's being used by a partner to swindle an investor. The DVD liner notes say a woman suspects fraud when her husband invests $500,000 in an unproductive company that's supposed to manufacture dolls. The reason I thought the TV guide synopsis was interesting was that Mulch was not a huge part of the, oh, I'm sorry, I did the puppy. Sorry. There's a puppy on the screen. I did the puppy. So cute.
He doesn't do well with high wind speeds outside the window, and he's been very, 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 very jittery the last couple of days. And so he just needs loving from time to time. But anyway,
he's so cute. Anyway, so I just
back to the important stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, the George Mulch, when he appeared before, was blink. It was a blink and you'll miss it sort of red herring. You weren't really expecting, if you're watching this for the first time, probably wouldn't have expected him to come back. And even though he does, it's interesting because these episodic mystery of the week type shows don't usually expect you either to remember past characters or, like, they put this in the TV guide synopsis. So clearly they're either he made enough of an impact that people would have remembered him. He was in Cast and Steele. He had the idea for the Virginia Mayo mayonnaise and whatnot. Or they just were hoping that the recognition would be enough for people, which I find very interesting because I mean, I don't know if they planned on bringing him back when they first did Cast and Steele, but I just thought it was really curious that they put that as the TV guide synopsis to sort of like, maybe it's just a way of saying like, hey, viewers, remember this guy? He's back. But yeah, they usually don't.
Yeah, they have to have been counting on at least enough viewers having seen the first episode and making the connection that it seemed like a good idea. And it could very well be also that, you know, studios, production companies, and especially networks, I mean, they were really big on ratings and viewer feedback and such. And it could be that the viewer feedback that they had gotten from that original episode was strong enough to, oh, they liked this guy. They thought he was a great character. We're going to, and then, you know, the word came down from on high, heads of the network. We want George Mulch back, you know, so they, come up with an idea.
Be.
And
sure,
if they had a character, even on a weekly, you know, series like this, where it wasn't streaming, you couldn't go back and watch it. If they had a character with a high enough popularity the first time around, yeah, I mean, why not mention him? Because obviously he made a significant impression in people's minds. I'm just speculating, but knowing what I do know about TV and ratings and the audience polling and such as that, it's conceivable.
Yeah. And again, I apologize for doing this, but I can think of a comparison, a Buffy-related comparison. He puts up with this. But in all seriousness, we
ought to change the name of this to the Steele Buffy podcast.
But the end of the first season of Buffy had her defeat the villain, and the second season began with, there were sort of one major villain in the first season and one sort of smaller villain, both in size and in sort of scope, because it was a little kid that got turned into a vampire, and he was called the Anointed One. Fans called him the Annoying One. And he was supposed to be the main villain of season 2. And for the first couple of episodes, they also brought in a character played by James Marsters, who played a sort of punk rock Billy Idol type vampire named Spike. He was only supposed to be there for a couple of episodes, but the fans liked him so much and really didn't like the Annoying One that Joss Whedon changed his mind, killed off the Annoying One, had Spike kill him, and then Spike basically sticks around in, you know, some form or fashion all the way to the end of the show, undergoing some serious character changes. But like, and at one point, apparently Whedon was so enraged by the fact that fans loved this character and he had to keep him on, he actually physically assaulted Marsters, grabbed him and shoved him up against a wall. He was not a good showrunner. There's some stuff.
It sounds like, sounds like there were some issues there.
No, it came out later that he was horrifically abusive on set, but he grabbed him and he like basically shoved him up against a wall and said, "You're dead. You get that, you're dead." And Marsters was like, "You're football, man. Like, I'm just here, right?" Like, but Yeah, so that was one of those cases where that character just became so popular after like 2 appearances that they were like, well, wait, guess we're keeping him. Like, there's no way you can get rid of him now. So
Yeah.
I guess Mulch made enough of an impression as well. Either that or they had always planned on bringing him back. But yeah, so in this, in my notes, second of Michael Constantine's 3 appearances as George Mulch. Also, Courtney Lynn Gleason, the little girl, is the daughter of Michael Gleason and Lynn Randall. So we've had Lynn Randall on as Rocky Sullivan and Randy in the season 1 episode, and now the daughter. And as well, Kay Callan is in this episode, and she plays Martha Ryan, who is the woman that hires Steele and Laura. And I joke about the Martha comparisons, but she also plays Martha Kent in Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. And I've said this. It's funny that I don't make as many references to Lois and Clark when we've done this podcast, because there are so many similarities between Remington Steele and Lois and Clark. It's unreal. Aside from the superhero aspect of it, you've got Kay Callan, who, like I said, appears as Martha Kent. She shows up here, but Abigail Holt, the actress Beverly Garland, who plays Abigail Holt, also played Ellen Lane, Lois's mother, in Lois and Clark. James Reed, who was Murphy in this show, was Jimmy Olsen's father in Lois and Clark. Both shows have a female protagonist who's very good at her job but have issues with trust. Both shows have a female protagonist with a female sibling that she sort of doesn't get along with, and a mother who's very neurotic and she also doesn't get along with, comes from a broken home. Lois's father left, Laura's father left. Like, there's so many parallels that it's just unreal in terms of the storyline as well. Like, we've got Tony in this show, but in Lois and Clark, there's another Italian male character that gets in between Lois and Clark named Dan Scardino. So it's like, I don't know if and I know that Robert Butler worked on Lois and Clark as well as this show. So there's a lot of connections. So I just thought it was really cool seeing Kay Callan here playing another Martha, even if it's not Martha Kent. So, and I'll talk about her character a little bit as we get into it. Did you said you had some notes for Jeff? Did you want to?
Oh yeah, no, we'll get to them. I will slap him upside the head at the appropriate point.
Yikes, poor Jeff.
Love you, man. Love you. But you screwed up, buddy.
Oof, ouch. Okay, here we go. Our opening scene begins at a bank. Teller is counting out a very large sum of money, $9,000 in total. And she asks the man, who is going by the name Mr. Wheaton, not to be confused with Joss Whedon, who I just mentioned, who is not a nice man.
Spelled differently.
Wheaton with like the terrier, like the puppy. How he would like his traveler's checks. He tells her in $500 denominations. And we talked about traveler's checks earlier, and I'm kind of glad we did, because I didn't realize, to be honest, I probably never really did realize the purpose of traveler's checks. And so the plot of this episode probably didn't make as much sense to me before than it does now, because it very much hinges on these traveler's checks and the fact that they can be reimbursed if something happens to them, which I have some questions about that, but we'll get there when we get there. So outside, we see the exterior of Lloyd's Bank, which I found kind of interesting because there's a Scottish bank with a similar name to it. I don't know if it was meant as a coincidence or if they've got branches in the U.S. I don't know.
Well, you'd previously mentioned
TV
similarity between a department store.
Oh, yeah.
And so, it could be that there's somebody on staff, or it could be somebody like Brosnan, just throwing out these names that, have some connection and maybe they have some sort of a fondness for those businesses. And so why not?
That's true. Yeah. So inside this bank, the mail teller is telling Mr. Van Adams, same guy, but now he's a different name, that he's going to need to start signing checks, and asks if he needs a pen. Mr. Van Adams says he has his own. The man offers him a place to sit, adding that signing $9,000 in checks is going to take a while. And I imagine it would. And then we see there another bank, the First Mercantile American Bank, and the same man, female teller, telling him she doesn't think that she sold $9,000 worth of traveler's checks before, adding that if they sell $10,000 in cash, they have to fill out a completely different form for the IRS. There's always more bureaucracy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the man pretends he didn't.
Because if you have $10,000 in cash, you must be a criminal.
Of course.
It's the same mentality that says, if you have a really fast car, you must be a getaway driver for a bank robbery crew,
Or, a billionaire, I guess, which maybe they're the same thing sometimes. Who knows? But, yeah, so apparently they have to fill out a different form. The man pretends he didn't know that, and she wishes him a good trip, and this time she calls him Mr. Blackthorn. So then we watch the man who has been to all 3 banks under these 3 different names. He walks through an office corridor to an office with the name that says the Wheaton Company on the door. He goes inside, but it's one of those offices. It's probably the same office. They've probably used the same office for
the Courtney Doll Company.
Yeah, well, but I mean, you also had them when they were doing that case with the mystery writer, or not mystery writers,
the mystery club. Yeah.
Yeah. And the office was just a desk. It looks like the same set.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hey, it's just 4 blank walls. You can get those anywhere. Go down to the hardware store, the Office Max, Right.
So, yeah, there's nothing in here but an empty desk and a chair. And he sits down. He opens one of the drawers, pulls out a bottle of whiskey. So I guess that's important to have. You don't need pencils, but...
No, gotta have a bottle of whiskey. Yes.
A glass and a container of charcoal lighter fluid and a matchbook. So, yeah, all things you need in an office. Inside his briefcase are all the traveler's checks. Takes them, dumps them into the wastebasket, and then douses them in lighter fluid. Lights a match, sets them on fire, and pours himself a glass of whiskey, saluting it as he watches them burn. Would this not set off the fire alarm?
That was one of my things.
Okay,
that was one of my notes right here. I was just going to get into. Because I looked, I couldn't find any specifics, but I would have thought that in 1984, 85 era, smoke detectors at least, and probably sprinkler systems, would have been required in commercial buildings, especially high-rise buildings. And yet the burning of the traveler's checks didn't do anything, didn't set any alarms off, didn't trigger any smoke detectors, any sprinklers, nothing happened. I don't want to be in that building.
No, it's like our elevators that catch fire at random. Like we can
That's why they took the smoke detectors and the sprinklers out of the elevator, right? Because it keeps going off. We'd rather have the building go down in flames than have to keep coming to this stinking alarm.
Yeah, pretty much. And like I said, we can barely make a grilled cheese in our apartment without the thing going off, much less, set a little fire in the trash can. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Maybe he took the batteries out ahead of time.
Well, yeah, but usually those are not like your home smoke alarm systems where you've got a battery that you replace. No, these are usually built in. They're powered off of the 120 volt system throughout the building. So it's not something that you can easily disable.
I got nothing.
I got nothing either.
Yeah,
the other thing is that I'm not sure how burning the traveler's checks helps him in this situation. Yes, he can always replace them later, but what difference does it make if he walks through? Because I know that if you walk through customs or TSA, well, now it's TSA, but it used to be that if you were carrying around $10,000 in cash, and I joked about it earlier, that you were viewed to be a criminal, and under seizure laws in this country, you could have your money just taken away from you just simply because you had it. You had too much money. You're not allowed to have that kind of money because you must be a criminal. So we're going to take it. And then you have to sue us and prove that you weren't a criminal to get it back. But I don't know that applies to traveler's checks because technically they're not cash.
Right.
And so what benefit is there to burning the traveler's checks and hanging onto the receipts? How is that? I'm not sure I understand how this helps his cause, knowing what we know about the episode later. I just don't see it.
The only thing that I could think of is that maybe he's worried that if he was caught with them on his person, then it would point to him. Like that's why he goes without them and then claims them later. But that's the best.
But then he's still got the receipts. He has to have the receipts in order to get the traveler's checks refunded. So again, does it really matter if you've got the traveler's checks themselves or the receipts? If somebody wants to prove that you had this cash, either one would do it. So there doesn't really seem to be any benefit to burning them other than I guess it's easier to carry 3 receipts than, $37,000 worth of traveler's checks. I don't know.
And like the only other question that I had, and I was saving this for later, but this is a good segue. His whole scheme is based on the fact that they'll reimburse you if something happens to your traveler's checks. How do you prove that something happened? Like,
you don't have to. All you have to do is go in with the receipts that give the number sequences of the checks. So he got them in $500 denominations of $9,000. That's 18 traveler's checks. So he has serial number, blah, 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 01 through 018, goes through, says they've been lost, they've been burned, damaged, stolen, whatever. They void out those they void out those initial traveler's checks, and then they just reissue new ones, which brings up something I was going to bring up later, but I'll go ahead and bring it up now.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the other problem with the idea of burning the traveler's checks, is because even if you go back and you get them replaced, there is still a linkage between those original traveler's checks and the reissued ones, because they have to document that they canceled these and issued those in their place. So it seems to be a lot of trouble for virtually no benefit. And I don't know if it's simply dramatic license, or if it's supposed to be this character overthinking a problem or overthinking a solution, or whatever.
I think it's meant to visually indicate to us that something is wonky with what he's doing. If we didn't already catch that anyway with the 3 different names and the 3 different banks, like it was. But you answered one of my questions then, because when I asked, like, how can you prove it? I was thinking, well, couldn't you just use both checks? But you're right. If they void the others, then okay, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, he burns them, and then we cut to the Remington Steele offices. Steele walks in to see Mildred, but no Miss Holt and a client waiting. She stands up and introduces herself as Martha Ryan. So here is Kay Callan as a different Martha. And she starts to tell him her problem, but Steele cuts her off, telling her to say no more and go into his office. This is interesting, because in the previous seasons, we've seen him like super eager to get at a client without Laura. And instead, this time, he turns to Mildred and mouths, "Where's Miss Holt?" Like it's almost like he's like, "Oh, I can't do this by myself." And then Mildred tells him that she's in Redondo Beach putting the finishing touches on the security contract. So he comments on how good she is at paperwork and tells Mildred to hold his calls. So I guess he's probably pretty happy he's not in Redondo Beach right now.
And that brings up something I want to mention in just a minute here, as soon as you get to it. We're almost there, because it ties in. Okay.
So Steele comes into the office and tells Mrs. Ryan to have a seat, throwing his coat onto a chair and sitting down at his desk. He asks her what
now, teacher. Now, teacher.
What'd I do?
No. In the script.
Oh, I didn't get a chance to read it this week. I'm sorry.
Yeah, in the script, before he and she get into their conversation, he says, "Well, now what seems to be the problem, Miss Ryan, or Mrs. Ryan?" And she says, "Someone's cheating my husband." And Steele says, "One moment, please." He searches his desk drawer, but like the top of his desk, they hold nothing.
Still on pencils?
Miss Ryan asks, "What are you looking for?" And Steele says, "Pencil and paper. My associate usually handles the ancillary details." No matter. Marvelous retention, tapping his temple. Go on.
I love it. I admit I didn't get a chance this week to read the script, but that's hilarious that he still doesn't have
Yep.
I can find it in my heart to find it funny here, but I bet he was like a good chunk of my students who come to class every day without a flippin' pen or pencil. It's English class. You're gonna write. Bring a writing to... Anyway, I'm good. So he asks her what seems to be the problem. She tells him that her husband is just retired. He built a nice nest egg as an aerospace engineer, so, almost literally a rocket scientist, but is now throwing it away on some harebrained investment scheme. Steele asks what the scheme is, assuming it's real estate or stocks, and Mrs. Ryan stands up and pulls a doll out of her purse. I have questions.
Okay.
So that doll, do you think the doll is meant to look like a Cabbage Patch doll? Did they do this on purpose? Okay.
I think so, yeah. And And I looked up Cabbage Patch, and yes, they were
So
in
did
the
I.
mid to late 70s. So this is definitely after that. I think it's for anybody who can't see, she's holding up a cat. I almost said a garbage patch kid, a Cabbage Patch Kid.
Cabbage Patch Kid, circa 1984. And I know because when I did my deep dive into the Cabbage Patch Kids, you can, because I didn't know what year this one was from, I couldn't remember. You can actually find that out by their butts. So she's mooning on the camera right now, but literally on the Cabbage Patch doll's bum is the signature of the creator of the Cabbage Patch Dolls. And beside that, there's two things that'll tell you the year. One is the color in which the signature is written, and the other is below it. In the earlier versions, you can see the year. So this one's in green, and it says 84. So, I mean, my mom has this habit. I was only 2 in 1984. I know I didn't get this doll in 1984. But my mother has this habit of buying things and then keeping them for years and then giving it to us later. She's got probably, I don't know how many versions of coats saved for my daughter for like when she's a teenager. She'll buy it when it's on sale and then withhold it until, so I probably got this when I was about 4 or 5, but this Cabbage Patch doll is circa 1984. And like I said, I took one look at that Courtney doll and I'm like, that's a Cabbage Patch Kid.
Yep. And I think that's really kind of somebody's intention of a joke there, because
for sure.
I can't say for certain because I don't really remember. I wasn't into Cabbage Patch dolls.
Really?
I don't know of anybody, or I didn't know anybody who was really into Cabbage Patch dolls. So I don't have any real good information about it, but it seems to me that maybe the original intention, because of the simplicity of the doll, was that it was going to be like the Courtney doll, where it didn't have a bunch of this, that, and the other thing to go with it, a bunch of outfits, this, that, and the other thing. And then they took off, they blew up, they become the thing, for kids, and never let any exploitation of kids and their parents go untapped. So, you just come out with all this other stuff. Yeah, we'll sell you this. We'll sell you this. We'll sell you this. We'll sell you this. Wasn't our original plan, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyway because we see dollar signs.
Well, I mean, sort of. So because I looked into it, right? And the original creator, and this is why, like, when she holds up the Courtney doll, you'll notice that the Courtney doll, the one main difference between the Courtney doll and the Cabbage Patch Kids is that it's actually the face is like it's soft and it's like hand stitched. That's what the original Cabbage Patch Kids looked like. They were originally called Little People dolls. They were created by Xavier Roberts in 1976, and that's the signature on the butt. Right. And he basically created the dolls. He was an art student who like combined sculpture with his mother's quilting skills, and he sewed the dolls by hand, sold them at arts and crafts shows. And then eventually in 1982, the licensing rights were acquired. He had to change the name because Little People was already owned by Fisher-Price for like the little toys and stuff. So that's when he renamed them Cabbage Patch Kids. And the original origin story of them were that they were hand stitched, they were unique, they were huggable, the faces became plastic, but they came with a birth certificate because the origin story was that they originated in a cabbage patch, kind of like the whole stork theory, and that children could adopt them. So they would get a birth certificate in the box with the Cabbage Patch doll that would tell you the doll's name and whatnot. And mine, I believe, was Barbara, although I'm trying to find the original because I don't know if all of the dolls in specific designs had the same name and birth certificate or if it was random. So I've been Googling trying to find her. This is not her original.
I think it was supposed to be random.
Yeah.
Because I think part of it was that you got one and your friend got one and another friend got one and they all had different names. It could have been, looking alike, but they all had different names.
So they did have a kind of a gimmick that it came with. And eventually as the company, because they didn't really expect them to sell very well. And then that first year, I think 1983 or 1984 was the year that people went crazy for them and they actually ran out. And they had sort of the Cabbage Patch riots, of that year for Christmas and whatnot. So, people were like fighting each other over them. Like it was It was
It was
brutal.
like Black Friday, but for
like
dolls.
Black Friday. Yeah, exactly. But for the dolls. So
Oh, no.
then they obviously, and as time went on, they made like miniature versions, and they did come with accessories and all the other kinds of stuff. So yeah, I don't know if the Courtney dolls were meant to sort of mimic the original idea, that simple, like, here's a doll, you get a little birth certificate. So
I'm sure it was.
But yeah,
I mean, when you've got a good opportunity to make fun of something and get away with it,
true.
Yeah.
And then they could do it in a way where, like, they're not technically going to have to pay anybody because they're not calling it a Cabbage Patch doll. It's a Courtney doll. And who says you can't hand stitch a doll? Like, why not? So yeah, it's quite clever that that's what they did for this idea. And like I said, Mrs. Ryan, she tells Steele it's a Courtney doll, explaining that their granddaughter's name is Courtney and that her husband was convinced that she would make a great model for a doll, except I'm convinced that the doll looks nothing like any child, much less their grandchild, but
yeah,
sure. Right? Like, yeah.
I mean, unless your kid looks like Statler or Waldorf, it doesn't really look like.
Right? So yeah, Steele correctly assumes he's put their investment money into the doll, and Mrs. Ryan, frustrated, says that under the community property statutes of the state, half that money is hers, and he's flushing it down the toilet. I really like the fact that you've got this, and again, this is partly down to Kay Callan's portrayal of her, but also partly just down to the character in general. Like, this woman has come in, she's concerned her husband's getting scammed. Like, she's clearly, like, she says that they're retiring, so she's obviously, and I looked it up, I think Callan would have been about 55-ish.
Which at that time would have been approaching retirement age. Now they keep
especially,
pushing
if
it up and up and up and up. But
and if he's an aerospace engineer, he might have saved for like early retirement, something like that, right? But like, she could have easily appeared as a, worried wife, wringing her hands, and I don't know anything about money, and I think he's being scammed, and blah, blah. No, she knows the statutes of the state for community property. She's done her research. This woman knows her finances, and she is money savvy, and she's the one of the partnership. I mean, you find out he's a horrible human being as we go, but like, she's the one who's on top of things and is protecting herself. And I find this really cool that she pops up and she's just like, yeah, he's being scammed. I know the rights. I know what I'm entitled to, and I'm not letting this happen. So fix it, which is pretty cool. So yeah, so she apologizes for her outburst, and Steele asks how much money she's talking about. She tells him $500,000. He's pretty shocked by this, and she continues saying that he's being built. He's pouring a ton of money into this for 6 months, and all they have to show are prototypes. She says that he won't say anything about it because he trusts his business partners. And again, I'm sure this is meant to be a commentary on the state of marriages, maybe back at the time this was filmed, but also this whole idea that the show has been exploring all the way through, that partners are often not communicating, or you've got these men who are in quote unquote business with a capital B that just assume that their wives either don't know anything about it or don't feel they have to talk to them about it, right? Like, they're considered to be sort of like, you keep the house and I'll do all the man stuff. Yeah. So that's my theory. So yeah, she's making sure that they're not going to get swindled. She stands up telling them that he won't even tell her the names of his business partners, but she swiped his stationery with the name and address of the company. Steele promises her that he will look into it, and if there's any fraud, he'll expose it. She tells him she's counting on it, and then as she storms out, he tells her that she forgot her doll. Angrily, she tells him to keep it, which he does.
Well, jumping back a minute, it just occurred to me. She's pretty certain he's being swindled.
Yeah.
But I've got to think that somewhere in the back of her mind, there's a little bit of suspicion of him as well, because he won't talk to her about it. It's not that he's unable to talk to her about it. It's not like it's a secret, a government secret, spies, and, all this other stuff. It's not a technology company where, the competitors might be trying to get some information. It's that he won't talk to her about it. Even if there are aspects of the business that she is not necessarily going to fully comprehend. I mean, she could understand a lot of the basics, and there's no reason not to talk to her about it. So the fact that he's not willing to talk to her about it, that's got to be kind of in the back of her mind saying, yeah, he's either he's being swindled or there's something else up.
Oh yeah. This would be a giant red flag for sure, because if it's legit, you don't hide that information. You wouldn't need to.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, and you could just bring it up in casual conversation. Yeah, they're doing some more prototype testing. The first ones didn't work out. They spent a lot of money, and then they suddenly realized that they had a manufacturing problem, or they ran into a trademark issue, or whatever. So yeah, I mean, lots of conversation that could happen that doesn't necessarily imply that you're not capable of understanding. So.
Yeah. Oh, and another thing I found, this just sort of randomly popped into my head as well when I was looking up the stuff about the Cabbage Patch dolls.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier Roberts was influenced by Martha Nelson Thomas's doll babies. So, like, there's a Martha connection there too. I don't know if that's why they called her Martha Ryan, but like, yeah, that just popped into my head. But yeah, it's. Yeah.
You've got a thing for that name, Martha. I'm surprised you didn't name your kid Martha.
Yeah. I don't. But I mean, even like with as you were just saying, this also popped into my head, like the amount of business scams that are floating around now and that were floating around then, specifically with regards to multi-level marketing schemes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we even get an episode later on that focuses on that one with the Lavender something or other. Laura's sister gets involved in an MLM, right? And these are companies that are on the face of it legitimate, but are essentially and are legal, but are technically pyramid schemes. You don't make any money off the product itself. You make money off of getting other people to sell the product, your downline, which then they have to get people, and they have to get people, and they have to get people, and so on and so on. And very few people actually make any money off of them. So if she's come to her, or her husband has come to her, and he says, "Oh, I've got this great idea. Get rich quick. This product we're going to make." Anything that sounds too good to be true usually is.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he won't give her any details. He won't tell her who his business partners are, but it's super legitimate, honest. Yeah, I'd be thinking that somebody's fed him a line too, of course, especially if all he's got to show for it is one prototype or a couple of prototypes. Like,
well, talking about the suspicion that I brought up a minute ago, that in itself should be suspicious. That he is apparently a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
And yet he's so willing to believe that they're spending $500,000 to come up with a handful of prototypes.
Yeah.
This is sensical in what universe? No rational person, especially somebody who's supposedly a rocket scientist, would fall for that. So again, there's got to be something else going on in her mind, thinking, yeah, either he's being scammed or there's something else going on, because he's not, he can't be that dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously?
For sure.
He can't be that dumb.
Yeah. And she's not dumb. We can see she's not dumb. I'm sure he was hoping that maybe she was dumb, because clearly he's doing all of this to also, honestly, my dude, that is a lot of work just to divorce your wife and not pay her. Like, what?
And especially when you're going to wind up killing somebody later on. Why not just do the easy thing? Arrange to have her killed. I'm sorry, but that's...
No, you're right. I've got some other thoughts on this I'll get to when we get there, but like, my God, man. Wow. Okay. So yeah, she tells him to keep the doll, storms out, and then we've got a scene change where the limo pulls up outside an old brick building with a sign on it that says Courtney Doll Company. I find it really interesting because in my research that I was doing for the Cabbage Patch dolls, and I can't find it now, and I'm annoyed with myself, but the factory that they built these dolls in once they were up and running had a special name for it, kind of like the Willy Wonka thing, and they would give magical tours so people could see, like, where these
magical mystery tours.
Yeah. But in this case, we've just got a sign on the door, And inside, pretty much nothing but a huge room with tables everywhere. They're all empty. I think it's probably costing them something to rent this empty space, but...
Oh, yeah. That ain't cheap.
No.
Especially in Los Angeles.
Massive square footage for nothing, right?
Yeah.
And then he walks in and like goes a bit further, comes across one woman at a table.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What is with the turned up jacket collar? I mean,
I know.
And then Laura does it later too. I mean, what is this a fashion statement? Or
yes,
I mean, it's
yeah, that was a thing. That was a thing in the 80s. I'm surprised I have to tell you this because I was 3.
Well, I was never very fashion savvy. I was always, half a decade or farther behind in the fashion trends. So what do I know?
They were often referred to as popped collars, and popular fashion trend associated with preppy styles. And people would deliberately flip the collars on their polo shirts, signifying a casual yet somewhat stylish look, according to the website I just.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Not buying it, but all right. I mean, I'm not buying that it was stylish.
But anyway. I mean, celebrities, like I've just Googled this, right? Celebrities at the time, like Joan Jett and Tiffany, were seen wearing turned up collars on their jackets, which contributed to the trend. And this just that statement reminds me of the TV show How I Met Your Mother. There's I've mentioned this character before, but Robin, the character of Robin, they find out midway through the show she's a Canadian. Her character is Canadian. That's often the butt of the joke.
Okay.
And they find out midway through the show that she was a pop star in Canada. And obviously it's meant to be sort of mocking Alanis Morissette's early pop career. And they find her early music video called Let's Go to the Mall, which is kind of like melding Tiffany and Alanis together. And you see her dancing around in like turned up collars and jean jackets and looks straight out of the 80s. And eventually after they're finished watching the music video, one of the characters turns to her and says, "This was the 90s. Why do you look like you're in the 80s?" And she said, "Well, in Canada, the 80s didn't come to Canada until 1993 or something like that." So, yeah, it just made me think of that. But yeah, pop collars were a thing. I don't love them, but so were shoulder pads, and I frankly think they're
never understood those either.
Awful.
Yeah.
And the worst part about the shoulder pad thing was that even for kids' clothes, they would come with shoulder pads. Dresses and stuff would come with shoulder. When I was a kid, the first thing I would do if I got a blouse or a dress for like Christmas or my birthday was cut the shoulder pads out because they all had them. Apparently, a 10-year-old needs to look like a linebacker in order to wear that dress. So
I guess.
Yeah, crazy trends that we're glad are gone.
Anyway, back to where we were.
So yeah, he finds this woman at the sewing machine and realizes fairly quickly that she doesn't speak any English, just Spanish. It's a fun little racial stereotype that keeps popping up in this series. He manages in halting Spanish to ask where the boss is. She points him towards an office. He thanks her and he goes towards it. Knocks on the door. There's no answer. Knocks again. And when there's still no answer, he tries the door. He actually knocks a couple times, though, before he just walks in. Like Laura, who just goes on in without even, So yeah, he finds it open and enters only to see who we later know as Mulch, a man climbing out the window. So he follows, but the man manages to make it to his car, a white convertible, and drives off. Steele smiles, though, because he's recognized him. So he knows where to go. And then we have a scene change where we got the corner of Hollywood and Vine. We see another office with a sign that says the Courtney Doll Company, a subsidiary of GEM Inc. So he's back.
That makes it sound official and big and important. It's a subsidiary.
Yep. And then we've got George Edward Mulch. He's walking down the hall. He's out of breath from having run away. And then he enters his office where Steele is already waiting for him at his desk reading a book. So, yeah. And Mulch must not have realized that it was Steele who opened the door in the office because he's surprised to see him, right? He remembers he was a detective, asks what he's doing for lunch, and then Steele tells him he recognized his rapidly retreating bulk, as he says. Ouch. And that's where George is surprised to realize it was him at the factory. I assume he figured it was the loan shark.
Yeah.
coming after him.
Because he does say that later. He said, well, who did you think it was? And he says, him.
Yeah. So yeah, the man behind, when he says that, there's a man right behind who says George's name. Steele gets in between them, saying that Mulch is otherwise occupied, but the man is having none of it. He hauls off. He hits Steele with the butt of his gun, knocking him to the ground. He's bleeding. And then he says, damn right he's occupied with me. So, yikes. He's not fooling around.
From Buckner's point of view, that's the bad guy here.
Yeah.
What was the benefit of going off to the deep end just right away? I mean, it wasn't necessary. And all it's going to do is create additional unwanted problems for him. This does not seem like a smart move on the part of a guy who's supposedly a very savvy criminal. Not
only that, but it gave Mulch the chance he needed to make a run for it again.
Yeah.
Like it allows the distraction, right? That gets, allows Mulch to climb out another window. They need to stop cornering him in buildings with windows. Like that needs to be, so he goes down the fire escape. But you're right. Like he unnecessarily creates a problem where there didn't need to be a problem.
Yeah.
So Steele goes to the window. He runs down the fire escape after him. And in the alley behind the building, we find the man strangling George and there's people watching. We see that. We see there's people at the end of it.
Hey, it's LA. Nobody cares.
I guess not. But I guess he draws the line at shooting him because he doesn't. But he's telling George he wants his money. Steele comes up behind him, grabs a long board stick. I'm not 2x4. I don't really know what to call it, but he hits him and knocks him off George. And when the man turns around, Steele tells him now he's occupied with him. So the man looks behind. A crowd has formed and is watching them. So obviously knowing he can't shoot Steele with witnesses, he tells George they'll continue their talk when it's less crowded and he'll deal with Steele later. So he leaves.
Yeah.
Once he's gone, Steele asks who he is, and George says, oh, he's a business associate with an idea he wants George to get behind. Sure.
Right.
Yeah. I believe. Thousands wouldn't, but I believe you. He tells Steele he's not interested, but describes the man as so enthusiastic. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I would describe as enthusiasm, for sure. George attempts to make light of things by asking Steele what brings him to the neighborhood. And that's where Steele grabs him by the coat and forces him to come with him. This is interesting. We still haven't seen Laura, right? I checked, and it's 10 minutes into the episode before we even see her. I wonder if that's a record. I also wonder what the purpose of it was, narratively.
You mean of her not being in it?
Yeah, of having her be elsewhere. Mildred gives she's in Redondo Beach signing something or other, but I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to her not being there.
Yeah, I don't know. Other than maybe it would just be too difficult to play out the sequence of events that they wanted to have happen if they were both there. Yeah,
that could be it. Or maybe it's because, now that I just thought about this, because what leads to the thaw of the freeze is her freaking out about him getting hurt. And he gets hurt. Mm-hmm. But he would have gotten hurt if she'd been there too. So I don't know. It's an interesting choice to have her be absent of the episode until 10 minutes in, for what doesn't seem to be a reason that I can see. But we go back to the office. Here we've got Laura not so gently tending to his head wound. Good Lord, that poor man's brain. That poor man. I really wish I had kept an actual computer list of all of the head wounds that he receives, because I think at this point, it's bad.
He could probably fund his own insurance company with all the insurance payments he's gotten out.
His brain's got to be mush. She's frustrated he didn't wait for her. He tells her that he was just going to investigate a doll company. He didn't anticipate Blood Alley.
Movie I'd never heard of, but okay.
Yeah, me either. But whenever you get a movie reference chance, there it is.
Yep.
He tries to stand up, but then has to sit back down because he's woozy. Concussion? Yeah.
Yeah, probably ought to go be seeing a doctor, eh?
Probably. Well, and then Laura, for once, suggests that he get examined for a concussion. Can you imagine him going and having an MRI done and the doctor going, my God, what do you do for a living? Like, what is your head is just yeah.
You need to get into a safer occupation like being a stuntman.
Right? Like it just I can only imagine. He's probably got more lumps than mashed potatoes. But yeah, so anyway. No, I couldn't think of it. That was a bad
yeah, I was going to say, because good mashed potatoes really don't have any lumps. But anyway,
actually, I kind of like them lumpy.
Okay. I mean, I can take them either way. As long as they have gravy on them, I'm good.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Anyway, he tells her he's just a little dizzy and then picks up the phone telling Laura to send in Mulch.
We see Mulch get up.
Oh, I do. Yeah. He's like
George
a dog.
Mulch. Yo-yo. Woo, 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 woo.
He's just like a puppy dog, right? Because he tells her, send in Mulch. And then we see Mulch get up. He walks toward the door. Laura calls her back and says to Mildred, hold, Mr. Mulch. Mildred whistles, literally like a dog, and then says, you're down, Mulch. Like, sit. And then back in the office, Steele insists she's making too much of this. When she tells him that she doesn't care how innocent it seems, he doesn't pursue cases without her. This seems like something that is only convenient when the script calls for it, because they pursue cases without one another all the damn time.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but this is driving me nuts. Like,
and sometimes she is the instigator of it.
Yes.
Oh, you think you're better than me? Yeah. Well, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in fact, most of their cases this season alone have that's what it's been. It's been the two of them doing stuff on their own and then coming back and talking to each other. So this whole you don't pursue cases without me is
I guess you could make the argument that he's not supposed to accept and pursue cases without her first approving it. And in the cases where they're in competition, it's because she has approved it. Oh, you're going to investigate this line of inquiry. I'm going to investigate that one. We'll see who gets there quicker. So I guess it's just, yeah, you can do it as long as I've approved it in advance. Is
sure, but I think she's more upset about the fact that he went somewhere without her and got hurt too, right? And then yeah, it just this is one of those, it's convenient for the plot, so she's saying this is the rule, but it hasn't been the rule for at least this entire season, right? Like they've been, I mean, it was the rule in season 1, and it was one that she adhered to very strictly because she didn't want him involved at all. But then season 2 came around and they basically pulled that other network that she had out of the running, and of course, but they very much pursued cases or angles on their own, and that was fine. But with season 3, it feels like because they had the freeze, so they had to have the two of them doing stuff on their own, that now, because I guess they're ending the freeze, we have to change that. It's like, anyway, that just kind of made me go, huh? Since when? He calls for Mulch again, almost right away. Laura tells him to hold, and Mulch looks frustrated. He's walking back and forth, like you said, like a yo-yo. Laura continues to lecture him that one of the advantages of working as a team is they back each other up. Steele is irritated and says he doesn't know what's worse, the ringing in his head or the rasping in his ears. And I guess Laura's satisfied with her lecture because she picks up the phone here saying, just as long as we understand each other in the future. She tells Mildred to send Mr. Mulch in. He gets up, says it's about time, adding that he's a busy executive.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Free-flowing idea company.
You gotta love how Mildred does not buy it, because she's just like, get in there.
Gotta love Mildred.
I do. Yeah, Mildred is she does not fall for anybody's crap, and I adore it. So he goes in, Laura tells him to sit down. He does, and he asks what he did. Like, he very much feels and looks like he feels like a kid being sent to the principal's office, right? Like, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I'm innocent. And Steele tells him guilt by association. Laura recaps how they met, reminding the audience, this is, I guess, their way of reminding anybody who doesn't know or who missed that episode. This is who Mulch is. by the way, if you've forgotten or you didn't see it, when we met you, you had been attempting to market a line of products based on celebrities such as Virginia Mayo mayonnaise and the Marilyn Monroe modern slicer. And Mulch says it was a good idea but have its time. I agree. I think these products would sell. Like, I think if you did it today, people would find it kitschy and cheesy enough that they would buy this stuff. Like,
I still don't get the Marilyn Monroe slicer, but okay, yeah, the Virginia Mayo, the Dorothy Lamour Road to America, yeah, those I get. So yeah, it definitely, you're right. It has that hokey, kitschy, cheesy appeal to it.
Yeah, like, and people like that stuff. Like, I like that stuff.
Imagine it would be huge at truck stops.
Oh, massive. Well, for Christmas, I was trying to, like, I don't buy my brother, or like, the siblings don't buy each other presents. We buy presents for the kids. But I will buy my brother like something small, right? Like him and his wife, I'll give them like a box of chocolates and usually something funny, just as here's something to unwrap kind of thing. And I can't remember what I found for her this year, but for my brother, I found they were selling these soaps in Sobeys, which is a supermarket here, that were Star Wars themed. And there was one that was, it was only Hope soap, and it was like Luke Skywalker on the front. And then there was a Darth Maul one as well, and a couple of other like Sith. There were Sith and Jedi ones, and so I got the Jedi one, and I just thought it was a kitschy, cheesy like little thing. But apparently, the soaps are marketed towards people with sensitive skin, and they don't have like additives, and it was something he had seen ads for and was looking for. So it was like, oh, okay, well this is handy because here you go. But yeah, like anything like that, I think would sell. And Mulch has this habit of coming up with actual ideas that are good ideas, but going about them all wrong.
You know, I kind of sympathize with Mulch in that respect. I've had ideas in the past that I wasn't in a position to do anything with.
Yeah.
And, a few years later, somebody comes along and makes a fortune on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you a couple of them right off the top of my head too. Kid ID kits. It used to be.
Oh yeah, those are a thing. Yeah.
That for a long time, it was, I would never, get my kids' fingerprints, keep those around. No, I would never do that. And then all of a sudden there was this like a flip of a switch, and everybody wanted them. Well, about 4 or 5 years before those hit, I had the idea of doing that because my wife was doing babysitting at the time and childcare, and so she had a bunch of kids, and it just came up out of that. And then another one was the idea of the two for restaurants. Up here we've got in Wasilla, which is about 45 miles away. We've got the KFC and A&W in a single store.
Oh yeah.
I thought of that like a decade before I saw anybody doing it. It's like,
they're usually
a combination of, you do something like A&W and DQ. Now, granted, those are owned by different corporations, so that merger would never happen. But the idea of combining two different restaurants that are compatible in types, in terms of the types of food that they sell, but are different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great idea. I thought it. Now, who was I?
Here it's Wendy's and Tim Hortons, because again, they're owned by the same company, so they put them in the same building, and you can go in and get Wendy's or Timmy's. But yeah, you're right. And the child kits, we get them handed out now with like St. John's Ambulance or the fire department will give them out. So police departments do that on at fair, kids fairs and things like that. The companies putting those out are just making money. Yeah,
I mean, it's just something really cheap to sell, but they buy them by the truckloads. It's like, could have been, or corn dog, hot dog buns. I love corn dogs.
Yeah.
And you would either buy a frozen corn dog that you would pop in the microwave, or you'd have to go down to a fair and buy one, but you couldn't do a corn dog on your own.
Right.
Fresh.
Right.
And so I had the idea of corn dog style hot dog buns. Well, guess what happened? 10 years later.
They did them, yeah.
Anyway, George, I sympathize with you, buddy.
I never had that happen with a product, but I had a novel idea once that I was the whole thing fleshed out. I was going to write the whole book, and then like 6 months later, a movie came out that was literally the entire idea that I had, and I
should have sued. Should have sued. You could have been a millionaire.
It's like, well, no, because if it came out 6 months later, then it had already been in development before my idea. So, anyway,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I was just like, damn it, no, I can't write that. But yeah, Mulch says it was a good idea, ahead of its time. I concur. Laura asks him how he got involved with the Courtney Doll Company. And Mulch goes into storytelling mode, saying he was walking down Hollywood Boulevard with his antenna out, his senses open, on the brink of inspiration. And then he says, when bam! And Steele dryly guesses he got hit by a bus. Mulch ignores him and says he got a new idea, asking, are you ready? Laura sarcastically says she has goosebumps. And he tells her this idea was a...
I love her delivery on that. It's just flat.
So, yeah.
And the sarcasm is in the lack of any sort of emotion or inflection. Yeah. And Mulch completely misses it.
Oh, he's oblivious. Totally oblivious.
Yeah, he's just in the zone.
Yeah, he's in his own head. He's pitching his idea here, and yeah, it's pretty funny. He says his idea was a new doll that both parents and kids would love. He goes on to describe a scenario. I have some thoughts about both of these things he talks about here, but he describes a scenario where... yeah, shockingly. I know. I almost never have thoughts, but yeah, every now and then. He goes on to describe a scenario in which a little girl asks her parents for a doll. Parents want to make the kid happy, so they buy the doll for her. She's so happy about it that for 5 minutes, but then she wants more clothes for the doll, a stroller for the doll, all the doll's friends like Skippy and Cricket and Bruce, not to mention all the hair accessories. This is a direct Barbie reference right here. No, it is.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, because you had Barbie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Barbie's little sister, who was named Skipper. Not Skippy, but Skipper.
Really? Okay.
And then you've got Barbie's friends. You've got Stacy, I think was one of them, and like there was Midge, the pregnant Barbie that lasted for like 9 months. There was like one maid, and they got rid of it because it wasn't popular. But like, she has all the friends, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then they obviously would make her dream house and the car, and then all the other accessories that go with that. Then Ken, right? Boyfriend, and then all the Ken dolls, the different Ken dolls, and then Alan, Ken's friend, who can wear Ken's clothes but was not popular, so they only made one of him. And like, this is clearly a reference to just the Barbie craze that was happening at the time, right? So yeah, and it's pricey. Like, you buy one thing, you got to buy all the things. So yeah, he says what started out as a simple bribe for your child's affections.
Okay, so I had it so wrong on so many levels.
Which I do. It has turned into a conglomerate of extortion. Yep.
That's a good line.
Can't say no. All of that is true. No lies detected. Like,
yes.
Because, I started out by buying my daughter one like horse figurine because she's obsessed with horses. Now she's got a whole flippin' barn in her room. Okay. And more horses that will fit in said barn. And she's like, they're just piling up. So yeah, that conglomerate of extortion.
His idea is really based on a sound concept. But it's one that modern marketing's destroyed, or at least that it's made it seem old fashioned, and that's imagination. It used to be, and maybe your daughter has done this. I know our kids did. A box, a spaceship, or if you're a Calvin and Hobbes fan, a transmogrifier, a race car, whatever. I remember our oldest daughter. We got her when she was, I don't know, 2, 3. I'm really lousy at this stuff. We got her a computer because she saw Daddy playing on his computer and she wanted a computer too. It was a keyboard with the plug removed, the cord. All it was the keyboard. But oh man, she had so much fun with that thing, just typing on her computer. Kids if they've got imagination, they don't need all the toys and accessories because they've got their imagination to do it. And on the other hand, or as part of the same story, whatever happened to parents saying no? I mean, who's driving the bus? Who's driving the bus here? The parents or the kids? I mean,
yeah.
Even if there are all sorts of toys and accessories, and my doll needs this other friend doll, and all such. Even if kids do want them, just say no. I mean, parents used to do that. Sometimes it was out of necessity because it wasn't in the budget, but it didn't ruin their kids' lives, and it, in fact, probably improved them by encouraging imagination.
I'm still bitter I didn't get a My Little Pony. So, yeah. Actually, I said that to my mom last Christmas, and she sent me one.
You're going to ruin my whole speech.
You're one. I agree with you. It's interesting that you said that because marketing at the time was designed to be marketed at the kid. Like when they made commercials, whether it be for cereal or for toys or whatever it was, those commercials were meant to be seen by the child, who would then go back to the parent and say, Mommy, I need this, I need this, I need this. Exactly. And I know some laws were passed with regards to who they can market it to and how years later. But it's different now in the sense that cable TV is not the same. Like if you even have it, we haven't had it ever. Once I moved out of my parents' house, I ditched cable and it was streaming, right? So we don't often see toy ads or any sort of ads for children's stuff because we're watching all our shows on
platforms
that don't have them. So occasionally she'll see an ad on YouTube, but beyond that,
I don't know what it's like in Canada, but here in the US, the streaming services, they started out, $5.95 a month for all these shows with no commercials. Then it was $9.99 a month for all these shows with no commercials. And then it was $9.99 a month with limited commercials. Yeah. And then it was, then it was $9.99 a month for a lot of commercials. But if you wanted limited commercials, $15.99 a month. And if you don't want any commercials, it's $20.99 a month. It's just, the idea was that you were paying to not have to watch the commercials, but that wasn't good enough.
Well, it sort of inadvertently destroys their business model, right? Because a lot of the revenue comes via advertising. So if you're not getting the advertising, then you're not. But it's aside from the initial subscription, right? So
but it's like the internet companies that, like my internet company here, that advertises unlimited internet.
Yeah.
We define unlimited as being as much as we think you are entitled to. It's like, and so it's fraud, it's misrepresentation, it's false advertising, but that's what these streaming companies have done, is that and in some cases, they even promised lifetime subscriptions at this rate with no advertisements. And then they changed the rules mid-game. It's it's very, very frustrating because the thing that was promised to get us away from this other thing over here has devolved into that other thing. It's just a lot more expensive now. I mean,
it's more.
It used to be we could watch it for free with commercials. Now we have to pay to watch it with commercials. How is this an advance? How is this an advance? I don't get it.
No, I don't disagree with you. But so we've got, if we go back to Mulch, he's talked about this conglomerate of extortion, right? No, it's on brand, because Laura says she admits it reminds her of her niece, right? So Mulch continues, wishing he had a doll to show them. Steele opens the drawer to the desk and hands Mulch the Courtney doll, which Mulch wonders where he got it, but decides not to ask, and then goes on to explain that this is the doll. Right? He says she doesn't come with the stroller, other friends, or accessories. This is it. Parents don't have to buy anything else, and decides that because of that, he's going to make $1 million. Here's the thing, okay? What you were just saying about play and pretend play and imagination, this is where initially, aside from the birth certificate, the Cabbage Patch dolls were also quite popular, right? And again, eventually the company did start making accessories and stuff that goes with them. But there are lots of companies now manufacturing toys that also don't come with anything else because of this knowledge that we have now that pretend play and imaginary play is beneficial to learning, and actually helps kids develop cognitive skills and stuff like that. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the toy company Melissa and Doug.
Mm-mm.
No? Okay. They basically make toys that are like, by and large, kind of classic wooden toys that either have like puzzles to them or encourage creative thinking through, and I'm looking at their website reading this, inspire creative thinking through screen-free, open-ended play. We make well-crafted toys that are developed with care to be passed down from generation to generation or shared family to family. And like basically what we talk about when it's open-ended play, you've got like kids engaged in the kids create the action in open-ended play. It's a kind of play that doesn't come with a screen. It's not battery powered, and it encourages creative thinking, problem solving, and social emotional skills.
Okay, you're kind of mixing two different things that aren't the same, though. What you're talking about here right now is a craft toy company. They're never going to be huge and successful.
Oh, and they're big. Melissa and Doug are huge.
Mattel big. Guarantee they're not Mattel big. But
money.
for Mattel, any big company like Mattel or somebody like that who comes out with a toy that doesn't have any accessories because it encourages imagination, you watch, they're going to come out with a line of accessories. And it's not about imagination. It's about extracting more money by selling the things separately rather than bundling them. But no, I mean, I'm all for what you're describing here with this other company. I think it's great, but yeah, they're gonna fall into that classification that would be like a craft company, like a craft beer. It's small batches. It may be big compared to some guy in a shop out in the backyard making toys by himself, but yeah, they'll never be a huge multi-billion-dollar company like Mattel or somebody like that.
Well, I mean,
which is
I looked
sad.
into it.
I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying it's sad.
I'm wondering if they're bigger here in Canada than in the US, because they're in every major toy store. Like you go into every toy store, you go into the bookstores, you'll find Melissa and Doug toys. Like they're literally everywhere. And it says here, when I Googled how, like, I just was curious to see how much money they make, because they've been around since 1988. $489 million in 2023 they made that year, and they were acquired by some company called Spin Master for $950 million that was in 2022, and then 2023 they were bought out by Spin Master for $950 million. So they're not like super small time. They're known for being low tech, old school, such as tea sets, trains, even stress relief toys for an adult. Spin Master is a Canadian toy company, so I'm thinking that maybe Melissa and Doug are Canadian. I don't know. But Spin Master created Paw Patrol. So that should tell you something, because Paw Patrol is like crack for toddlers. It is. No, I'm serious. Like, there is not a single small child that I've met that doesn't know that show and all the puppies and all the things. And you want to talk merchandising, Spin Master's going to take Melissa and Doug and merchandise the crap out of them, because like Paw Patrol is like every new season there's a different pup with a different vehicle that you have to buy and whatever else. So like,
but see, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now, see, I remember when I was a kid, though, one of the things I do remember from being a kid, which is apparently compared to most people a very small amount, it was called a bag of blocks, and it was about the size of a 18-month-old kid, a bag full of wooden blocks with different shapes. And I would those and my matchboxes, I would build buildings and, the ramps, because you had the triangle shaped blocks that you could make as a ramp. Hours playing with those things. It's just a bag of blocks and my Matchbox cars or my Hot Wheel cars. That was it. I didn't have I imagine I had a bunch of other stuff, but simple stuff like that. I mean, that's where, okay, I just think I just invalidated my own argument. I was going to say that's where kids get imagination, and I'm the last person to talk about imagination. But I mean, that was a good childhood. I would rather have that than some of the childhood stuff I see nowadays. Anyway,
well, in my further Google searching, Spin Master is a Canadian company, but Melissa and Doug are actually American. So, yeah, apparently they spent $950 million US to buy the company. And the chief executive said that Melissa and Doug is a trusted brand of early childhood toys with evergreen portfolio that will expand the company's reach. And they like their deep knowledge and developmental play and passion for creativity, imagination, and sustainability. So what it was interesting to me about Mulch's idea is that it basically goes with everything that if you ever speak to a early childhood educator, somebody who works in either daycare or junior kindergarten or kindergarten grades, they'll all tell you the same thing, that kids that age learn best through play.
Yeah.
They, in fact, I don't know about the US, but we have 2 years of kindergarten here. They start school at age 4. Or if they're not 4 yet, if they're turning 4 that year before January, they start junior kindergarten. So you could have a kid who's 3 in JK, and then they go into kindergarten, and those are the 2 years. Often the classes are combined. So, and not every province, but Ontario has JK and SK. And those grades are evaluated not by like academic targets, but by social emotional targets. So are the kids able to understand the routines of the classroom? Are they able to get along with other kids? Are they able to, meet these sort of developmental guidelines as opposed to, can they read yet or whatever else it is? That stuff comes in grade 1. But a lot of the play, a lot of the toys that they use are meant to facilitate that. So when, again, going back to George not being an idiot, he has a good idea.
Oh yeah.
This is literally like, and I don't assume that George Mulch knows anything about early childhood development in children because he's, he understands
the sharpest tool in the shed.
No, but the concept of like kids taking something and creating an imaginative story from it is something that will sell well if it's marketed correctly. And we saw that with Cabbage Patch Dolls. Like they came literally with just a birth certificate and that's it. And then the rest was up to you kind of thing. Right. So yeah, he has a good idea, but again, it's ahead of its time, or it's not really being developed here because he's being used. Yeah. Which kind of sucks for Mulch.
And I think the best example of what we've been talking about in the media is Calvin and Hobbes. I love that comic strip.
Yeah, it's a great comic strip.
Best comic strip ever. I mean, nothing in there, virtually nothing in there is based on real things that he has or does. It's all based on a stuffed tiger, and that's it. Oh, and a cardboard box.
Yep. Yeah. It's great. It is. It's great. And I mean, I can't think of a single person who hasn't read that comic strip that doesn't like Calvin and Hobbes. So, like childhood imagination will always be something that is useful. You can market to if you do it right.
Yep.
So he has a really good idea. He says that the Courtney doll, all she needs is your love and imagination. That's a good sales pitch.
It is.
That would sell. It would sell. Oh, I feel bad for Mulch because he could have gotten, his Virginia Mayo idea was good. This is good. He's just not able to stick the landing, so to speak.
He's kind of like me in the sense that he comes up with some ideas that are good, but at that point, you're done.
Not working.
You've extended yourself to your maximum. You need to hand it off to somebody who actually knows how to do something with it. Right?
Yeah. And obviously James Ryan and Pete Gillespie are not the guys because they're using poor Mulch. Yeah. So Laura sits him down and tells him that Mrs. Ryan thinks that she's being swindled out of her retirement money. Mulch is surprised, and Steele adds that she sunk $500,000 into the company, and when he went to the factory, it was hardly worth working at capacity. He asks, where'd the money go? And Mulch admits, and this is where you're like, Mulch, come on, my dude. Like, you have a good idea, but like, you got to be on top of this. Like, he says, I don't know. I just handle the creative end. The dollars and cents I leave to my junior partner, Pete Gillespie. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Like.
Yeah. Dunce cap.
Yeah.
I know he has a dunce cap around here.
He asks where Pete is now. Mulch tells him probably drumming up more business. That's a rose-colored glasses way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
He tells him that he told Pete about his idea, and 3 weeks later he called him telling him he found a backer, James Ryan. He tells Steele they met. He offered to name the doll after his granddaughter, and the rest is history. Laura tells George they'll need to see the books, and Mulch happily agrees to comply, saying the sooner this is cleared up, the better. They go to leave. Steele grabs for the doll he was given, saying, "George, my dolly." He wants his dolly. Oh.
Hey, it was given to him. He's entitled to keep it.
He wants his dolly. I love it. But Laura sidelines him. She insists, "I'll handle this." Steele tells her that he's okay, and she tells him to stay. So much for we're a team. We back each other up.
Good boy.
Right? Like,
here's your doggy biscuit.
Here's your dolly. Sit with your dolly. Like, what happened to we're a team?
Yeah. When it's convenient.
Yeah, literally 5 minutes ago, we don't go anywhere without each other. We work together. And then like 5 minutes later, "Oh, you stay. I'll go." Like, okay. How is that going to work out any better? But okay, sure. Whatever. So yeah, she goes, he sits back down. You can see he's not impressed.
Mm-hmm.
But at least she does take Mildred. So I guess there's
a line
make some argument that she's not on her own, but I don't know. In Mulch's car, Mildred and Laura, they're there. Mulch asks Laura what she thinks of his car, and she says that she's surprised he can afford it. He tells her he put his own money into it because a successful businessman has to present an image.
And there's a missing line here.
Oh, okay. What's the... Because I didn't...
Mildred says, "What about an unsuccessful businessman?"
I love it.
In the script that we have, which is, I don't remember, stated a bit before this, what she said was instead, same can be said for an unsuccessful businessman, which actually puts a whole different light on it.
Yeah, it does actually.
Which, it's not just now kind of a backhanded inquiry. Now it's a backhanded insult almost.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I like that line better. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Either way, Mulch is not impressed, asking Laura if she had to bring her. Laura tells Mulch that Mildred is their financial expert and that before she joined them, she worked for the IRS fraud squad, where Mulch nearly drives his car off the road. Which I imagine is one of those scenarios where even if, like, you know how when you're driving down the road and there's a cop car behind you, and though you're not doing anything wrong, you're still like, oh God, you're checking the speed limit every 3 seconds.
You pull your foot off the gas pedal.
Like,
I can't touch the brake. Can't touch the brake.
Yeah. I imagine that's what Mulch is feeling right now. Like, even if he feels like his numbers are legit, he's got, oh my God, the IRS fraud squad. She's from the fraud squad, and she's behind me, and she's gonna look at my numbers, and right off the road.
Yeah.
So.
IRS, they could look at 1 + 1 and claim that it isn't 2.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not something poor Mulch, he's peed himself, and he meekly asks if she's comfortable back there as they pull up to the curb beside a greasy spoon called Tommy's Diner. Mulch tells them that it belongs to his brother-in-law, who is a math whiz, so he put him on the payroll to keep the books. Yeah. Laura sarcastically again says it looks like a first-class operation. Her sarcasm game is on point in this episode so far.
Yeah.
She's got it. She's on a roll. It's good. Meanwhile, a car has pulled up behind them. A man gets out of the car and goes to payphone. He makes a call, identifies himself as Gillespie, telling whoever's on the other end that Mulch went into the diner with 2 women from the detective agency. He admits he's nervous, but agrees to wait until he hears from the person on the other end before he does anything. So we get that little scene, and then inside the restaurant office, it is a mess. Just a mess. Like, boxes,
and
papers.
the thing that can be said is that, okay, he's the math genius of the family. At least he qualifies it, because you can't imagine anybody in that family can do even basic math. So yeah, he would probably be the genius of the family.
Yeah, that would be, we're not grading on a curve sort of thing. Mildred is shocked, asking about double bookkeeping and wondering where the ledgers are. Mulch's brother-in-law asks are those the black books with the red lines in the corner? And Mulch then calls him the egghead in the family.
Yeah, proudly calls him that.
That's not good.
No.
His brother-in-law says he was going to get some next week. Mildred, deeply unimpressed. So then we see them leaving the restaurant. They've got shoeboxes of receipts in hand, and Mildred is assuring Laura that she's seen worse. So, yeah.
Believe it or not, Laura's, I don't.
Again, with the sarcasm, is great. Yeah. She promises to have a profit and loss as well as a balance sheet ready for her in a day or two. And again, I really love the fact that in this episode, I mean, we know that Mildred has a head for numbers. This has been obviously established as part of her character.
Right.
But oftentimes that's not something that is attributed to female characters. That's usually given to male characters, being like the math whiz or the math savant or genius or what have you. And not just female characters, but an older woman, right? Mildred, as an older woman, is not only like the head for numbers, but she's the one that knows how to work the computer. You know, the thing that only young people are supposed to know how to work. That is, I think it's really unique to Mildred's character because she's got a skill set that neither Steele or Laura have. And it's not one that you usually see attributed to a woman of her age. It's generally something that's given to younger characters or stuff like that. So,
well, one of the early computer programmers, in fact, the person who came up with the term computer bug, because it was literally a bug that had gotten into the electronics back in the days when computers were made out of tubes and diodes and all these big electrical connections. That programmer was a woman.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like they aren't. I'm just saying that when we see them in television and stuff like that, it's generally like, oh, you've got this guy who's a math genius, or if it is a woman, like she's young and sexy and hot and whatever else. And we've got Mildred. Mildred's awesome. I love it. And then again, Martha Ryan, who is their client, who is also shown like in that first scene that she knows what she's talking about with their finances and with what her rights are as a spouse and all the other stuff. Like she's not waiting around to get screwed, basically. She's on the ball.
Yeah.
So I like that. Oh, puppy dog. Hi. He's so cute. Sorry, none of you can see this dog, so I'm aware that this is making no sense, but he's adorable. His little fluffy face and his little cute nose. Anyway, yeah, he's so cute.
My buddy.
So yeah, Mulch looks up and he sees that someone has stolen his car, which is pretty funny considering. Laura drops her shoeboxes and runs after it, jumping on the top of the car. Okay, and like the driver almost hits a building, manages to shake her off the car. She rolls onto the sidewalk. The man in the driver's seat tells her she's crazy, adding that she could have gotten them both killed. Yeah. She could have. She tells him that he should have thought of that before he stole the car, grabbing the keys. Mildred asks if he has any idea what grand theft auto goes for in the state. The man claims this is blatant prejudice in the 1980s, accusing them of being prejudiced against him for being Hispanic and assuming he stole the car. I kind of like the fact that they've pointed this out. Like this is something that it's often used as a shorthand in movies and TV. Like you've got, your criminals are often either, if they're terrorists, they're either Russian or they're Arabic, right? If they're, your maids are usually Hispanic characters and stuff like that. So at least he's like, hey, wait a minute. No. This is prejudice. This is just because you assume I stole the car. Kind of reminds me of that scene in the movie Speed where Jack pulls over the guy in the car on the highway and he's a black man driving a Jaguar and he pulls him over and he says LAPD and the guy goes, hey man, this is my car. I own this car. It's not stolen. And then Jack pulls out his gun and he says, it is now. Move over. It's like he takes this guy's car. But yeah, that just kind of reminded me of it. So he accuses them of being prejudiced and Laura points out that this isn't his car. So in genuine defense to Laura, she wasn't assuming anything based on his race. She just, that wasn't his car and he was driving it. So
yeah, I mean, there's there is some logic to that accusation.
She wasn't just jumping to conclusions. She took a tiny step, and there the conclusions were. So, yeah, he says he knows that. He gets out and asks them how many car thieves wear three-piece suits or shine their own shoes. It's a good point.
And they're not just shoes; they're Florsheim's.
Yeah, and then Mulch asks if he stole those too. Oh. So he hands them a card introducing himself as Juan Esteban Castro. There's a name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a name.
There's a name. Anyway, so we switch to another scene. Steele is in the office and he's reading the card that said, I wrote reading the car, and I was wondering why my notes said that. So just, yeah. Reading the card that says Repo Man to the stars.
Yeah. I mean, in LA, everything is to the stars. The hot dog stand to the stars.
Don't they later on meet in that Christmas episode meet the podiatrist to the stars?
Garbage man to the stars.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something to brag about.
Yeah.
He asked Laura if he actually took the car, and Laura admits he had the right papers. So, okay, here's my question. Because wouldn't he still need to actually tell them he was repossessing it?
No.
Instead of just taking it?
No, because once the repossession has been, I don't know the exact processes involved, but basically a repossession that's our property. And because when you're buying something, technically you don't own it. The finance company owns it, whether it be a house or a car, and they hold the title. It may be registered in your name in the case of a car so that you can operate it, but they own it. And if you're in violation of the financing by not making your payments at a certain point, they're entitled to go recover their property, and they don't have to tell you squat.
Well, I get that much, but if you walked out your door and your car's gone, would you not immediately call the police, assuming it had been stolen? Like, wouldn't they have to, like, at least leave a note saying it's been repossessed? Sorry about your luck. Like,
there may be a notification process between the repo company and the police. I don't know, or the finance company and the police. And you're right. I mean, if I looked out and my car was missing, my first thought would be it was stolen. But as far as I'm aware, there's no requirement for them to notify you before or after. All they have to do is, say, hey, you're missing your payments. We are going to. I would guess then, actually thinking about it, that they would probably at some point in the mail have sent you a notice that if we don't
that's what I'm saying. Like, there'd be some.
If we don't receive payment by this date, we are going to repossess it. But do you think Mulch would have looked at something like that?
Oh, probably not. That's a good point. Yeah.
Because I mean, after all, he immediately after this,
he says that
the guy says, Laura says that the guy the paper showed that George Mulch was behind in his payments, and George says, well, no, I wasn't behind. I hadn't started them yet. I guess the banks never got to read my letters explaining. It's like,
no. And it's funny because it's funny that you say that about owning your car versus not owning your car. It's one of the reasons why I almost never buy anything on credit for that reason. Even my car. Every single car I've owned, I've bought outright in cash, despite the fact that they have attempted, like the last car that we bought, we saved for it. So we actually bought it was technically still a used car. It had 15,000 kilometers on it. So it was pretty much brand new. And when we went to the dealership to buy it, the guy kept trying to get me to finance it, even though I had the check. And I was like, no, take it. Here's my money. He was like, you sure you don't want to finance? No, here it is. I have it. Money here, go. Take, right? So but yeah, like it's funny how you don't really think of those things when you use credit, right? How you just assume, okay, I've bought it, this is mine. But in Mulch, you're right, like I just haven't started making them yet.
So George.
I must not have read my letters.
To him it made perfect sense. Oh no, I'm not behind it. I hadn't started them yet.
Well, and I've known people like this. I'm not gonna name names, but I've known people that genuinely think that the rules don't apply to them if they just explain themselves. If they just explain, if they just call up the court and explain, or if they just call up the rental company and explain, if they just explain, and it's like, that's not how things work though. Like if you don't pay, they'll kick you out. If you don't, but they think that they're...
Now, depending on the situation, the circumstances, what the company or service is, who you get a hold of, by talking to them and explaining, you might be able to get some cooperation from them, but it's not going to be, oh yeah, sure. No, go ahead and just, live in that apartment for the next 6 months and not pay anything because you're in a tight spot. No, it's okay. Well, we'll give you another 15 days and you need to come up with X number of dollars. It's a give and take. It's not just going to be, well, but I shouldn't have to because I'm explaining.
Because I've got an explanation, right? I've got a reason.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then Mildred comes in and gives Laura the background check on Pete Gillespie. Steele asks about the man in the alleyway, right? He's not part of this. He's something different. Russ Buckner. He assumes he was a loan shark, and Mulch sort of equivocates, calling him a financial services broker. Laura asks him how much he is into him for, and George tries to calculate, allowing for fluctuation in the prime rate and Buckner's interest being 55 points above that, and comes up with a total of $5,000.
Mildred has a line here in the script. If this man's cheating anyone, he's the most inept swindler in history.
Yeah, she's not wrong. She is not wrong because he is terrible at this. Like all of it. I mean, he really is just an idea man. The execution part, no. So Steele is kind of shocked, saying he soaked James Ryan for $500,000 and wondered how he can be that much in debt. And Mulch tells him he hasn't drawn a penny in salary yet, and adds that Pete Gillespie told him their startup costs were a bit higher than projected.
Yeah.
The phone rings. Mildred answers it. Laura says it might be time to drop by and visit Pete Gillespie. Steele claims he's feeling much better and insists on going with her. Before he can get the chance, Mildred tells him it's James Ryan and he wants to see them. They both look kind of confused. Right. So then we switch to the living room of a huge and very beautiful home. So obviously an aerospace engineer makes good money. It makes sense. Steele and Laura, they're seated on the couch, and Mr. Ryan is explaining to them that when his wife informed them of their investigation, he wanted to speak with them. He adds in a condescending tone that his wife doesn't understand that it takes money to make money. And I just want to punch him.
Did he ever explain that to her? I mean, really sit down and talk to her and explain how that philosophy works. Because if he didn't, it's his fault.
Well, even if he did, I think she's smart enough to understand that, but she's also smart enough to understand that when you put a ton of money into something and see nothing come, something's going wrong. Like, she's not stupid. And that's kind of like, again, I put it down partially to the script, but also down to Callan's portrayal of it. Like she has not shown any indication whatsoever that she doesn't understand how money works.
No.
But
she's got a pretty good handle on the concept. Yeah.
Yeah. If anything, it's the opposite, right? And he's talking down to her as if she's somehow an idiot. And it, obviously that's part of the, I think that that at the end of the day, and again, we know this, find out later that this is all a big elaborate plot to leave her with nothing when he divorces her because he's, a human poop stain. But, but like if he has to go to these lengths to do it, he obviously knows how competent she is. Right?
Yeah, I mean, if she was that dumb, he wouldn't. It would be a lot easier.
He could hide his money way easier if she was an idiot, but she's clearly not. Right? So this is sort of further complicating his scheme that she's hired these people, and like, he's like, it's just my silly woman of a wife doesn't understand it takes money to make money, right? And then just then the little girl in ponytails and a cute little dress walks in with Mrs. Ryan. She's the embodiment of like adorable. She addresses him as grandpa and he introduces his granddaughter Courtney, whom the doll is named after. Both Steele and Laura are charmed by her. She's the first child character we've had that you don't want to strangle. So
Yeah,
I'll give
really.
it that, because like the other characters that we've seen so far, not so much.
Oh, yeah.
He shakes her hand
hear
and
you.
comments, I hear you, Mr. Steele. I hear you. Yeah. Steele shakes her hand and says that she is a living doll. She turns to her grandfather and tells him that her parents are on the phone. He excuses himself to take the call as Mrs. Ryan explains that her parents are on vacation for the first time since she was born, and they've been calling every few hours to make sure everything's all right. And yeah, if that isn't the most accurate portrayal of early parenthood, I don't know what is. Like, I can remember that when we went to Scotland when Kira was 3 to see Scott's parents and his family and whatnot, and we went to Inverness for 2 days for our birthdays and left her with his parents, and I was like, I wanted, like, Scott was like, no, I'm taking the phone from you. You're not calling again. She's fine. Like, stop it. So, yeah. So we overhear Mr. Ryan assuring them that everything is fine, and Courtney asks to speak to them. He hands the phone to her, and she says goodbye, and then sets the phone down beside the base and walks away. Mr. Ryan, and this is an important thing because it ends up being a major plot point later. Mr. Ryan tells them that she hasn't quite gotten the hang of it yet and hangs up the phone. So he returns to the subject of hand. He offers to pay them for their time, but assures them that everything's fine and they don't need to worry. Steele isn't convinced. He asks him how well he knows Pete Gillespie, and Mr. Ryan says that he worked as a bartender at the club they used to go to, says he always found him an amiable young man. Laura asks if he's aware that he was dismissed due to a bridge scandal. What's a bridge scandal? Do you know?
That's in my notes. Is she meaning a scandal involving somebody trying to sell a bridge, or a scandal involving a crooked card game?
Yeah, I was thinking the game. Yeah, I was thinking the game personally, but okay. So it wasn't just me.
The bridge scam, you know, I don't know how much truth there was to it or how many times it actually happened, but supposedly in decades past, con men would try to sell some gullible sucker something like the Golden Gate Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge, you know, and tell them, well, you know, you own this. If you buy this, you'll own it, and you can collect all the money from the cars going through. And you know, supposedly, that was a scam. I can't imagine somebody at a country club being involved in that kind of it's a bridge scam. So it's got to be a card game, you know. But it just seems like, okay, we're going to have a scandal involving a game of bridge cards. That seems like poker? A really low level scam. I mean, how much money can there be in that? Well,
because when I hear of the game bridge, a game of bridge, I imagine like 4 old ladies, a la the Golden Girls, sitting around a table with cheesecake. Like, I don't think of high stakes, big money. So poker might have been a better one to use there, but so Mr. Ryan says yes, but he felt that the case against him was pretty shoddy, and he even tried to get him reinstated. Steele basically is polite, but he says that he doesn't think they should drop the case. Mr. Ryan says they're the experts. It's obvious he doesn't want them to continue.
You know, if as Ryan is talking about Gillespie, and I found him a very amiable young man and all this stuff, she gives him a look like, I don't know. It's like
Martha gives him the look, or Laura.
Martha gives him a look. It's like it's almost a questioning. I don't know what it is, but it's there's a look on her face that it's like, really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not real. It's pretty subtle.
Yeah,
but
it adds.
I was watching, and I watched that scene a couple times because there was just something about it, and it's like, it's starting to click with her that something's not right here, and that he's not being scammed.
Well, and also, I mean, Steele is diplomatic about this, but he could have just come straight out and said, "Yeah, but you didn't hire us; she did."
Well, that's true too. Yeah,
right. And I mean, I think he reads the room and sees that Mr. Ryan is trying to sort of throw his weight around, and I'm the husband, I'm the boss, I'm the guy, right? So he basically kind of says, well, you know, I don't think we should drop the case, kind of implying that we're just looking out for you, right? As opposed to saying like, just because they tried that once, if you recall, with Flaming Emily.
Yes.
When her husband attempted to fire them, and Laura was like, yeah, but you didn't hire us, she hired us, right? So yeah, he clearly doesn't want them to keep going, but Laura assures him that he won't regret it. He doesn't seem so sure of that. And inside an apartment, we see who we figure out is Pete Gillespie, a tall man preparing dinner. The phone rings, he picks it up, it's Mr. Ryan on the other end. He tells Pete not to panic, but he needs to disappear for a while. Pete is upset, saying he promised he would take care of things, and Mr. Ryan says that he will, but his wife has complicated things by hiring private detectives, and he needs more time to sort it out. He tells him pack a bag, and he'll call him. Next, we see the rabbit arrive at Pete's apartment. Laura and Steele approaching the door. They knock, no answer. Laura, however, can hear the kettle whistling, so she picks the lock. Again, doesn't even try to see if the door's open. But they enter the apartment. They enter and they see it's empty. The noise being the kettle. She takes it off the burner. Sorry?
So this guy was in such a hurry to get out of there that he couldn't even take, half a second to turn it off. He's just going to let it sit there and the water boil out of it and start a fire and burn the building down.
Yeah, like, because if
I buy it.
If you leave a kettle boiling like that, like the water, as you said, will eventually evaporate and just it burns into the bottom. And I know that for no reason that I want to get into, but yeah, that's what will happen. So, so he takes off the burner. Steele does note that most of his clothes are gone, so he obviously had enough time to pack. He just
didn't have time to turn that burner off.
And here's what drives me nuts. Again, another contradiction here. Laura says innocent men don't run, except they do. In fact, that's just what Max did in the episode that we just saw, Stronger Than Steele.
Well, and that's kind of there's a corollary to that I've heard in law that says, there are some people who say, well, innocent men don't need lawyers, and the corollary is, actually, innocent men need lawyers more than guilty people do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because
for sure,
they're the experts in getting you to say things that they can take out of context and create this mountain out of a molehill, and you're left standing there saying, "What happened?"
There's even like cases of false confessions or situations where people have been badgered into confessing to things that they didn't do, like Amanda Knox, I believe her name was. I don't know if you know this story, but I actually was listening to a podcast on this somewhat recently, and it was a crime that took place in the early 2000s. She was like a university student. She was living in Italy. She's American, and she was living in Italy, studying abroad, and her roommate was murdered while she was out with her boyfriend. And the Italian police just immediately decided, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, that she was the one who killed them. And they took her into custody. They told her she didn't need a lawyer because she wasn't officially being arrested. They were just, she was a witness. They were asking her questions. So they kept her there for days and days, and basically wore her down to the point where she falsely confessed to it. They eventually caught the actual guy, I think. It was a burglary gone wrong, but like the police didn't buy that story, so they just basically wore her down to the point where she confessed to being somewhere she wasn't. Just
the abuse, the mental and emotional abuse to stop.
She spent
the physical
years in
deprivation.
Jail. Yeah, and she eventually got her name cleared and got out and stuff. But like, I'm listening to this and I'm just thinking, I can't imagine confessing to something I didn't do, but then I haven't been locked in a room, for days, being told over and over again, you did this, until you start to doubt yourself. So,
and that's the thing is I think there's a term for that. It's called gaslighting.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. So, Laura's innocent men don't run is an interesting statement, considering just, like I said, the episode right before this.
That's exactly what happened. Yep.
And she believed in Max with literally no reason to. Like, she was just like, wow, he's Atomic Man, so clearly he didn't do it. Like, it just,
Well, that was a reason.
Yeah.
That was proof.
Exactly. So yeah, it just, I don't know. It seems like convenient statements when the script requires them in this episode in some cases. Here's another one. So yeah, Steele says it sounds like a Raymond Chandler novel. And outside, we see them walking towards the car where they're attacked by two men. One gets a hold of Steele and begins to beat him, kicking him repeatedly in the stomach. And a car drives up, and Buckner gets out, and he tells Steele to tell his fat friend he will be expecting his payment tomorrow. The goons leave too, and Steele collapses to the ground. Now, I get that Buckner's maybe getting some revenge here for the fact that Steele walloped him. But I would think that the message would be better delivered by delivering the beating to Mulch.
Oh, I'm sure that was on the schedule. That was the next thing in line. But
fair enough.
Steele had obviously insinuated himself into the situation and was going to be a problem. So, yeah, get rid of the problem and you accomplish two things. One, you get rid of the problem. And secondly, it does send a message to Mulch, and then you get a more personal message.
Yeah.
With a card, sent to Mr. Mulch.
Could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So later on in Laura's loft, Laura is bandaging Steele's stomach. Yeah. What's the purpose of the bandage? I'm curious. Like, did they cut? Like, because from what I understand, like, is this what you would like? Did he break some ribs? Like,
that would be potentially, broken ribs or cracked ribs or something.
Okay.
That would be the only reason for doing that, because if it was just heavy bruising or something, an ace bandage wouldn't give you any benefit on that. Maybe
it wouldn't.
Potentially like a preventative for possible hernia. I don't know. It doesn't seem to really.
Because my dad broke his ribs a couple of times, and in both cases, they didn't tell him to put any bandages around it or anything. It was basically just taking a lot of anti-inflammatory. They have to heal on their own.
Yeah.
So it takes time, basically. It's not something that I guess this is just visual to show us that she's tending to him,
and that he's pretty painfully hurt. Yes.
And that we haven't seen Brosnan shirtless for a while. I don't. Maybe that could be it. I mean, she could be tending to another.
Something, but I almost said something.
she could be tending to another.
We haven't seen Laura shirtless for a while either, but.
I'm just saying it could have been another head wound, but instead we get the full shirtless effect. So it could be that. Could just be that this is for us, for the female viewership that enjoy the visual aesthetic.
And what do we guys get?
You get the turned up collar.
Yeah, thanks.
So yeah. Hey, I don't make the rules. I just benefit from them.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's bandaging his stomach. And as she does so, Steele muses that it appears that Pete Gillespie is the one that benefits from this enterprise, putting Mulch's idea and Mr. Ryan's money together. He asks her to make it a bit tighter, which, again, I'm not really sure of the purpose of it, but she does. Possibly too tight, because he somewhat sarcastically tells her that she's an angel of mercy.
Yeah.
She'd be a terrible nurse.
Oh, yeah.
Like, of all the professions, nursing is not her calling.
Oh, in other words, she's like a lot of the nurses that are actually out there.
That's true, actually. That's a good point. Yeah, she's obviously distracted, and she's upset, saying that she's been getting a lot of practice lately. Steele suggests they increase their medical coverage, as you pointed out, that they probably need to do that. Laura is irritated that he's being glib, and she says, that's right, joke about it. And this is one of those moments where, and to be fair to Mr. Steele, I think he's so used to Laura just ignoring his injuries that he doesn't really get that, hey, she's actually upset about this one. Like, this is, usually she just kind of gets mad at him for getting knocked on the head and goes about their case. But in this particular instance, she's quite distressed by it. And he tells her that he's sorry
that it's coming out as anger rather than concern.
Absolutely. Well, but that's kind of how she operates sometimes. That's true. Especially when she's feeling things she doesn't want to feel. right? In this case, she doesn't want to, she's been trying so hard to adhere to the freeze. They're not, it's just, they're no, it's all business, no pleasure. We're separating. We're just partners, blah, blah, blah. Bull, right? She still has feelings. You can stop the relationship, but the feelings, that's a harder thing to kind of put the brakes on. And she's mad at herself for feeling them, and she's mad at him for making her feel them by getting beat up. Like it's a weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it makes sense in that she's not liking the fact that she's feeling these feelings and doesn't know how to handle that. So he tells her he's sorry that his various bruises and abrasions annoy her, and the next time he'll go to the emergency ward. This is an interesting statement because, again, this is one of those cases where you can tell the writers are American and not British, because Steele, who's a British character, should have said, next time I'll go to the A&E. Because they don't call it the ER in Britain. They call it the A&E, which stands for Accident Emergency. And this is not a criticism. When you've got American writers, they're not necessarily going to know that. But I think that's kind of interesting because his character would use a Britishism, even if the writers aren't. Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah. And again, like I said, it makes sense. He doesn't realize that she's worried. She's not usually worried about him. She rounds on him, though, and says that Buckner's men could just as easily have killed him. He admits that she's right, and she's upset at that, too, asking that, is that all you have to say? I'm not really sure. What do you think she wants him to say? Like, that's kind of what I don't get. Like, I don't know what she wants out of him here.
I don't know. Maybe she's expecting him to apologize for having jumped into the case without her to begin with, because after all, if he hadn't done that, maybe it would have gone a different direction. This wouldn't have happened. And so it's all your fault. You brought this on yourself, and now I'm having to deal with it and blah, 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 blah. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, what is he supposed to say here? Yeah, or is she just trying to provoke anger from him because she's angry and she wants to have a reason to be mad at him that she can blame on him. She can't really blame him for getting beat up.
No.
But if she can get him mad, if she can provoke him and he snaps at her and lashes out at her, well, okay, now see, I got an excuse to be mad at you. You just gave me that excuse.
I don't know if she's looking for a reason to be mad or if she's looking for him to validate her fear. Like, I wonder if because she says he could have easily killed you, and he's like, you're right, but he doesn't sound too upset when he says it, right? I think I could be wrong too. You could be right. Like, Laura, she's confusing sometimes, but I wonder if she's wanting him to say, yeah, I could have been killed. Like, I sort of validating why she's scared. Like, just admitting, like, this was a stupid thing. This, sorry, or whatever. But, like, you're right. She's either looking for a reaction in anger, or she's looking for him to admit that her feelings are valid, because I don't think she understands why she's feeling them. Yeah. In that respect, right? And he reminds her that Remington Steele isn't a plumber, and that if he's to continue to play the part, he runs the risk of running into men like Buckner, which so does she. I mean,
it's
yeah.
I got a note here because the script direction here simply reads, Remington rises, sensing something deeper than irritation welling up from Laura. That's it. So I don't know how the choice came for Brosnan to play that line the way he did, whether it was a discussion between himself and the director and Gleason or Butler or whatever, or if that was just something he chose to do in the moment. But I think it's interesting because given what Laura's been doing up to this point, it would be totally understandable if he did get angry and rather than saying it in the way he did, he said, Laura, this is Remington Steele you invented. I mean, he isn't a plumber. Look, if I'm going to continue, with a bit of an anger and edge to it, but he didn't. It's like, hey, this is what you created. This is kind of, I didn't realize this was what I was signing up for when I signed up for it, but I did. And so, what do you want me to do about it? This is a hand of cards I've been dealt. I'm just playing them the best I can here.
He says it, you're right, because I didn't even think about how he could have delivered that line differently. And that's a really good point, that he could have said it in anger and it would have come out very differently. In this case, he says it conversationally, gently, almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sort of reminding her, like, as you said, this is what you've given me to work with, and I got to work with it. And I mean, he could have even gone so far as to point out that you also run the risk of running into men like Buckner, because they're both doing the same job. Now, technically,
That's
his
true.
name's on the letterhead, so he has more of a likelihood of being a target. But she's been kidnapped a few times too. So has Mildred.
Yeah,
they've all been. It's not like this is their first rodeo, so to speak. No. So. Yeah, you're right. He's very kind about the way he reminds her that this is part of their job, part of their lives. And she turns away here and says she doesn't like seeing him get hurt. And I think it's, again, I don't know if this was, I didn't get a chance to read the script, if it was in the physical direction or if Stephanie just chose to do this, but it makes sense that she would turn away from him and say that line, because admitting something like that for her is a big deal. It's difficult. She doesn't like to admit that she feels like that she needs somebody, or that she, The
script direction is she turns away and stands with her back to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So that's a vulnerability. She doesn't want him to see it, right? She's looking away, like, don't like to see you get hurt. And Steele agrees with her.
Yeah.
I don't like to see me get hurt either. Like, I'm with you on that. But she, Laura continues. She says that she wants to put her arms around him. She wants to hold him. And he's sort of, and again, physically, how this is blocked is really well done, because he's sort of slowly walking towards her, almost like, approaching a feral cat, like tentatively recognizing this could bite you at some point, but just kind of like making yourself available to her in a way that is cautious, right? He tells her this sounds better than a bandage. And then she says she can't. He asks what's stopping her. And again, this is like, if we go back to the can agreement, the original freeze, like, he agreed to her terms willingly. I mean, there was a bit of a cheeky response at the end about, like, we'll see, it'll last a week. But he's, for the most part, played along. He's bent the rules a couple of times, but for the most part, he has respected her boundaries, and he's still respecting them here in the sense that he's asking her, what's stopping you? Like, because she says, I want to put my arms around you and hold you, and he's like, he's not saying, okay, here, have a hug. Like, he says, well, what's stopping you? And then she says, you, me, us. Right. And that's when he realizes she's going back to the can agreement. And again, he kind of lets her come to this conclusion on her own. He's not pushing this. He's not saying, well, maybe your idea was stupid and we should get back together. Give me a kiss. He lets her kind of reason it out. Right. And she says, even though it was her idea, she's having a hard time living with it. They've been so distant, and he feels
interesting change there.
Yeah.
In the script.
Oh, okay. From the script.
Okay. Because what we get was, I know it was my idea, but I'm having a hard time living with it. We've just become so distant lately. In the script, it reads, you've become so distant lately, which I think would have made for a better context with his response of, I've realized I've been a bit standoffish lately, but I mean, that's the way you wanted things.
Yeah.
I think it would have been better that way.
I agree. Yeah.
So it's an interesting change. I thought it was a step backward, but anyway.
Because if they had kept it that way, as you said, and his line after that about, I realize I've been standoffish, it again acknowledges that he's respecting her wishes. He even says that, only because I've tried to respect your wishes. Yeah, I've overstepped the mark a time or two, but I'm only human, right? Like and this is something that you wouldn't necessarily get with a lot of people. right? Like in a lot of cases, if you had a relationship with somebody and you ended it and said, okay, we're going to continue to be partners here, but there's not going to be any relationship, and both parties still had feelings for one another, probably the other person would leave that employment situation because it would be difficult, and they'd be right to do so. Like, you wouldn't blame them for it because, it would be difficult to work with that same person every day and not have what you had before. Like but he does, and he like you said, I'm trying to respect my wishes. Yeah, I've missed the mark a couple of times, but hey, I'm only human.
And I do have to give Jeff Melvoin some props there for that line, because with that line, he does at least try to account for some of the inconsistencies in the episodes regarding the freeze.
And then Laura.
So Jeff, okay, there's your kudo. Get ready for a slap down later. Anyway.
And Laura cracks a smile and says, thank God for that. Right. So she obviously she doesn't mind that he's overstepped the mark a couple times too. But this is where he kind of takes a more proactive part of the conversation. Up until this point, he sort of let her reason through her feelings, but now he says, this agreement hasn't solved anything, has it? Right. And she says, no. We can't go forward. We can't go back. So we just stand here frozen in place. Literally the freeze. So this is where he senses his opportunity. The feral cat has been tamed, and he steps forward and he kisses her. She kisses them back, and when they part, he says, the beginnings of a thaw. So yeah, this is our thaw. Thankfully, it's here. We don't have to. But unfortunately, we still have a couple of episodes after this that make no sense in light of the thaw. But whatever. Anyway. They kiss again, and the phone rings. Of course it does, because they're kissing. At least they're not being shot at.
That's true.
So that's a plus. And he tells her they should really think of getting an answering service. Wouldn't that just be an answering machine? And wouldn't she have one?
Well, an answering service for the business. But right, since this is Mildred calling her loft, it would be her own personal answering machine. Although I suppose, there would be some logic to her being on the answering service account. So, if somebody calls her number, like Mildred or Steele calls her number and she's not there, they can leave a message with the answering service, knowing that, Laura, even if she's not home, even if she doesn't come home for the next 20 hours and doesn't think to call her answering machine and have it read the messages back to her, or she got the low end model that doesn't do that over the phone, she could just call up the answering service and say, hey, got any messages and such? Yeah. Probably not likely, but I mean, it could be.
It would make sense. It definitely would make sense. But it's Mildred. Of course. They've kissed. Of course it's Mildred. Her timing's impeccable. Yes. And she tells him that she's finished going through Mulch's financial records. It's very important. Steele, you got to feel bad for this guy. I mean, he hasn't, he's probably like a man just getting out of prison here. He's like, I'm getting a kiss.
I'm getting a little more than a kiss.
Yeah, exactly. Not happening. Because he says that woman's efficiency is exasperating. And Laura, for once, agrees with him. So she's also not impressed with the. So we switch. We're back at the office. Mildred is with Steele, Laura, and Mulch. She tells him that the last 6 months the Courtney Doll Company has taken in $496,000 in startup costs and paid out the same amount. Mulch says the foam stuffing has to be imported from Taiwan, and they're trying to get ABBA to sing the Courtney jingle. I'm sorry, they can't get stuffing from the U.S.?
Well, even if they couldn't, even if they had to bring it in from Taiwan, I can't imagine
that stuffing would cost so much.
Yeah, exactly. And calls to Sweden, I mean, compared to a call across town or across state, it's going to be more expensive. But that even those two things together would I would think would barely make a dent in
$496,000. He's really bad with money. Like, he's really bad with money. Mildred moves on to the balance sheet, saying that the Courtney Doll Company has $800 of inventory, and that is the total assets.
Yeah.
Steele asks about the factory. Mildred says it's rented. Laura summarizes that they have spent $496,000 and only have $800 to show for it. Mulch wonders where the money went. Finally, Mildred says that's where it gets interesting. She says the only 3 companies that were paid were the Wheaton Company, a manufacturer, the Blackthorn Corporation, a sales group, and the Van Adams Enterprises, a distributor. Laura congratulates Mildred on her work, saying tomorrow they will check them out, and she suspects they will lead back to Gillespie, assuming that he has been getting kickbacks for fraudulent billing. Mildred's excited, saying she's going to get to do some real gumshoeing, which she has done before, but
yeah.
Laura says she sat behind the desk long enough, and Mildred is thrilled. Steele realizes that Laura is trying to bench him again for his own safety, and he is not impressed. And I wouldn't be either, because let's face it, he's not, like, the two of them, neither one of them carry a gun around at all times, right?
No.
Like,
assuming they could find it.
Assuming they can find it. They're both equally as vulnerable to a physical attack. I mean, he's not exactly Mr. Buff, and she's 90 pounds soaking wet. Like, I don't know what she thinks. I get it. This is more about her feeling safe, that he's safe, than it is about his capabilities. But
yeah, your comment about her weight soaking wet. My youngest daughter, barely 5 foot, maybe 100 pounds, soaking wet after a large meal. Don't cross her.
No,
Do not cross her, especially when it comes to her kids. So
I'm not saying that somebody small couldn't be a formidable opponent, but to our knowledge, Laura doesn't have any martial arts skills, right?
Well, neither does my daughter, but she's.
I'm just saying, like, they're both equally physically adept at handling themselves should the need arise, and that this is more about her own fears with regards to him, as opposed to any real safety issues. Like, she doubles down, saying the street is no place for the boss. He'll be here manning the desk, collecting data, formulating theories. And Mulch, totally oblivious, is like, you're a born leader, Steele.
Oh, and Laura is just loving this.
Yeah, she really is. So we switch over.
And of course, Steele not only hates it, but he just gives Mulch a just like, oh, you just.
Yeah, he's unimpressed. At Steele's apartment, he's making up the couch for Mulch, and Mulch thanks him for letting him stay the night. Steele tells him that they can't allow men like Buckner to get his hands on him, and calls entrepreneurial men like Mulch a dying breed. Mulch agrees, saying that he might seem unflappable, but he's getting a little perturbed the way things are going lately. Oh dear. Steele tells him that's a good sign, as it shows he hasn't lost his sense of reality. Yeah, but Mulch is upset. He says he really thought this was it, and it had felt so real this time. And again, I feel bad for the guy, because it was a good idea.
Yeah.
He admits that his brother-in-law had wanted him to come in on the restaurant with him, but he told him he needed to be true to himself and follow his star. He doesn't seem so sure of that decision now. Steele, it's weird. Steele seems eager to get out of the conversation. He tells him things might look different in the morning. He's usually the one who kind of empathizes with guys like Mulch, but he seems pretty eager to just dismiss him here.
Yeah, it could just be that that's his way of expressing himself over having been sidelined with George.
That's true. Still upset about it.
Yeah.
George says that his father always said, you win some, you lose some, and some days you get rained out, but you always dress for the game. Steele says someday you'll have to explain to him what that means. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory, personally.
Yeah, I thought so too, but
yeah, maybe it's because it's a sports metaphor.
Yeah,
Steele doesn't know sports.
Well, I mean, still, even if you're not into sports, I think you could figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually quite like that saying, because I think it's good advice, right? Like, either way, you keep trying. But
Yeah.
he tells him to get some sleep, and Mulch says that Steele is something he hasn't seen much of in his life, a square shooter.
Yeah,
you almost
right.
get this. It's almost every episode someone tells Steele, "Oh, at least you're the guy you say you are." He gives a little wink to the camera, which is always funny. He grins, tells him good night. Mulch sits down on the couch, defeated. So, poor Mulch. We see the following day, Laura and Mildred arriving at the door to the Wheaton Company. She knocks on the door, no answer. Tells Mildred to keep a lookout, and Mildred, eager to be the gumshoe, says, "You're covered." Laura picks the lock, and the two of them enter the same empty office with nothing but a desk. Laura's surprised that this is the headquarters of a company that is taking in all that money. Mildred observes that it looks like a dummy corporation to her, and Laura continues to search the room, opening the drawer, looking in the trash can. This is where she finds remnants of the fire and pulls out a piece of the burnt traveler's check. Wouldn't all of it be burned? Like it's paper.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you throw something in the fire, and the fire is kind of gathered in the center, and if you've got pieces of it that are sitting off to one side, yeah, it's entirely possible for part of it to get burned and another part of it not to.
Fair enough.
I mean, it's careless.
Yeah,
it's careless, but yeah.
Yeah. Back at the office, we don't see this enough, and I wish we saw this more. Steele arguing with the computer, because it's
It's funny to see somebody argue with a computer and lose.
Yeah, well, he's sitting there. He's trying to figure it out. Mulch, meanwhile, goes on about where he should go to avoid Buckner, Nicaragua. Rambles on about the climate until Steele interrupts him and asks for further instructions on whatever he's doing on the computer. I'm assuming just trying to get on the computer.
Online, yeah.
Yeah, because Mulch tells him to engage the modem. Steele says he's done that. Mulch tells him to punch in the access code. Steele says he's doing that, but the blasted thing won't give. Yeah.
He's trying to log on to some sort of a research database.
Yeah. He begins to rant about computers being useless pieces of hardware when Mulch simply presses the enter key and the computer begins to work.
That's there's an old joke in computers about how the manual will say, do this, this, and this, then press any key. And people say, there is no any key on this.
Yeah. So yeah, this is good thing he didn't. And Steele looks mildly embarrassed because he doesn't know computers. Yeah, so he begins typing, saying that he's going to try to find out what he can on the 3 companies that Mildred mentioned. So yeah, you're probably right. Some sort of database that they've purchased or subscribed to. Mulch continues his thinking process, saying the Falkland Islands might be nice. Good thing it's not 1982. A little bit of a
historical reference.
Yeah, because the war between the UK and the
war skirmish.
Yeah, well, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, so he muses about whether he could get a direct flight from LA, and then we see a scene switch. There's a BMW pulls up, parks in a spot.
Okay.
Okay.
Here's a problem.
Okay.
Time and time again, we've seen them cover up with tape the makes and models of names of cars, boats, and yet here we see it's clearly a BMW. What is that? 833 CSI or something like that. I would have to zoom in to get the exact model, but they didn't even try to cover up. What's the deal? Why do you have to cover up some and not others? I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you.
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Anyway, back to where we were.
No worries. We see a BMW pull up in a spot outside a shabby-looking house. Mr. Ryan gets out, knocks on the door, telling the person inside it's him. Pete Gillespie lets him in, and Ryan accuses him of getting kind of jumpy. Pete points out that they are onto him, and Ryan tells him to relax and put the gun down. He reminds Pete that only Steele and Laura suspect anything. There are no police involved. Mulch is the perfect patsy. All they have to do is remove them from the picture. Pete is uncomfortable with this, pointing out that he's talking about murder. Mr. Ryan smiles, having obviously no issues with this conversation.
Yeah, really.
Yikes. For an aerospace engineer, he's quite sociopathic.
Yes.
Back at the offices, Laura and Mildred come in telling him that the companies that took Mr. Ryan's money were dummies. Mildred adds that they are just rented office space and nothing more. Mulch says, great, then asks, what does that mean? Mildred says it looks like Gillespie was taking the money for himself. Steele clarifies that using George as a cover, he was taking the money and paying it to himself. Mildred says yes, and Laura adds that they found the burnt remains of traveler's checks in one of the offices. Mulch wonders why anyone would burn traveler's checks, and Mildred says they haven't figured that out yet. Laura adds that the checks were taken out in 3 names of the men who supposedly own the companies. George exclaimed that it's unbelievable, and Mildred asks what is. Steele shoves some dot matrix printer paper at her, saying they got the computer to find some background information on the companies. Mildred looks at Steele as if he's a particularly stupid puppy and says, you did, boss? You did that? You got that computer? Good for you. Good boy. Here, have a treat. Yeah. Steele at first says it's just a simple thing, but halts himself when he sees Mulch's knowing look and turns the conversation to what he's found.
Yeah.
He says he found out something very intriguing about these 3 gentlemen. They've all been dead for 20 years. Mildred and Laura are...
Okay, Jeff. Let's have a talk.
Okay.
Let's have a talk.
Here we go.
Okay, so they did a background check on these people.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, they've been dead for over 20. No, what did they get? They didn't get a report that says they've been dead for over 20 years. No, what they got was a report that shows date of birth, date of death. So they wouldn't just say, they've been dead for over 20 years. They would say, yeah, they died in X number,
Yeah, that's true.
In 19, whatever it was. And then as they going along, and Steele makes the comment of, makes a reference to the Day of the Jackal, where Edward Fox plays an assassin who creates false passports by getting birth certificates of dead men who were born in the same year he was. They just solved their case.
Yeah.
Because by fudging and saying, well, these guys have been dead for over 20 years, they're not playing fair.
Yeah.
Jeff isn't playing fair because they have the date of birth. All they have to do is do the basic math to know that Gillespie doesn't fit. The only one in this scenario, the only one within the realm of this scam that fits age-wise to those 3 men who were dead is Ryan.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, Jeff, you're not playing fair here, buddy.
Jeff, we need to have a talk.
Report to the principal's office.
and Mulch is all over that reference, which is, again, it's a more recent film than we usually get from his film references, right? And Laura, she's like, good Lord, not another movie buff. Like, which she knew.
Yes.
Because I don't know why Laura's surprised by this. His first idea literally had him sending creepy fan mail to old Hollywood movie stars in order to jumpstart products based on their, like, what about that says I don't know anything about movies? Like,
all of it. Anyway.
Yeah. Mildred wonders what the Day of the Jackal has to do with Pete Gillespie, and Mulch suggests that he set up the false passports in order to leave the country without making tracks. Laura admits that would fit with their theory. Mulch says it would, and Mildred says that Gillespie could withdraw all the money from the 3 companies in cash and exchange them for traveler's checks. Mulch wonders why burn them, and Mildred says, well, we wondered that too, but Mildred says because you can destroy them and have them refunded later. And if Gillespie flies the coop with the money, he leaves a paper trail. Laura adds that taking cash creates suspicious bulk, and Mildred points out that with the traveler's checks, he can carry that amount in his pocket in the form of receipts. Laura adds, it'd be a real bitch if he did all this and then, like, the receipt fell out of his pocket. Wouldn't that suck? Yeah, really. Like, wouldn't that really suck? Because, like, I can't.
I've got it in my wallet. It's right. I've been pickpocketed.
Like I can't tell you how often I've lost a receipt. So I'm just saying that. That'd really suck.
Yeah.
Laura adds that he could go anywhere in the world, turn in the receipts, and rebuild his fortune without anyone being the wiser. Steele tells Mildred to call the Ryans and tell them they're about to wrap this thing up, and Mildred goes to do it.
And, by the way, as an addendum to our earlier discussion about how traveler's checks are serialized and the replacements would be serialized and the two would be linked together, You know, one other thing you have to do to get a replacement checks? Show
Show your ID
to purchase and get them replaced. So there was going to be a paper trail all over the place to this thing.
Well, for sure. But I mean, he used the IDs of the 3 dead men. So that part would be not covered, but like he's not using his own ID to get the traveler's checks.
Yeah. But all they would have to do is make the connection.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
To him.
It's not exactly.
And it's that one linchpin that if you pull it out, everything collapses. And so, yeah. So anyway.
And Steele seems pretty like beside himself at the genius of the con. So I guess he still loves a good thought out con because he's like, oh, this is really smart. I do like that.
You think about it, half of what they do in their cases is just they run a con on the bad guys.
That's true. That's true. Laura, though, suggests that he should go home and rest those ribs, adding that she'll come by with some Ben Gay. Steele gets excited, assuming that she means something more intimate.
Be careful where you rub it.
Yeah, right. He's going to go home and wait for her massage. Mulch wonders about him. What about him pointing out that Buckner is still after him and that his physical well-being is still in danger? Steele brushes it off, saying that they should be able to arrange something with Mr. Buckner. Yeah. Mildred, meanwhile, is having problems with the phone. She tells him it's busy and they decide to try again later, which obviously we find out is due to Courtney. Steele, satisfied by their brilliant day's deduction, tells George to come with him. I like how he handles Buckner. This is funny. The two of them in the Auburn, Mulch in a trench coat, hat, and sunglasses.
Not obvious at all.
No, not at all. Steele assuring him he's going to get Buckner off his back, that he has a plan. Mulch isn't so sure and is nervous because they're right outside Buckner's gigantic mansion, so I guess his loan sharking pays off.
Sure.
Steele says, of course they are. Where do you think he keeps his car? Mulch wonders what they're going to do with the car, and Steele tells him that they're going to steal it. He points out that he drives a Porsche 28S and that he knows several dealers, and for those of you who can't see me, I'm doing air quotes, who could get it out of the state and into the hands of a new owner at a profit for them in a matter of hours in cash. Mulch, not excited about this plan, does not like it. We see Steele scaling the wall to the mansion. He drops down outside the front of it, sneaks further into the estate, and Mulch, not having any other choice, pulls up to the gate in the Auburn, pulls out a long, I'm assuming it's some sort of long metal rod. I don't really know what it is, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's just like a piece of conduit
pipe or something.
Yeah, it's aluminum conduit that it's got a bend on the end like a hockey stick, so that he can push that button that's hidden around the corner. So that's all it is. I mean, just
okay. So yeah, he pulls it out. We see Steele sneak into the garage, get into the Porsche, just as Mulch shoves the rod through the gate, both opening it and tripping the alarm. Buckner and his men run out to see Mulch speeding away in the Auburn, which, I mean, that car is like super conspicuous. So
yeah,
gee, I hope Buckner doesn't see the Auburn at some point later on in his life, because he's gonna anyway.
The limo might have been less conspicuous.
Or the limo, yeah, exactly. Poor Fred for a day, though. Yeah, he speeds away and Steele hotwires the Porsche. Buckner orders his henchmen to go after the Auburn. Steele peels into the driveway, driving the Porsche. The other two turn, but before they can see him, Steele throws 2 smoke bombs. Where the heck did he get those? One purple, one yellow.
The Army-Navy surplus store.
Yeah, I guess. Drives through them to obscure his face. One of the henchmen goes to shoot, but Buckner stops him, saying, "That's a $10,000 paint job."
No, That looks like a factory paint job to me. It certainly, at least from what I can see on the screen, does not look like a $10,000 paint job.
It would have made more sense just to say and name the price of the car.
$40,000 car, yeah.
Yeah, like you wouldn't want that damaged. That's a pricey car, right? Like, yeah. Anyway. Mildred, we get a switch. Mildred and Laura are sitting in the office. The phone rings. Mildred answers it, but tells the other person that Mr. Steele isn't in right now and offers to take a message, and hands the phone to Laura, telling her it's Pete Gillespie. Laura identifies herself on the phone, and Pete asks where Steele is. Laura doesn't answer, but tells him that he's in a lot of trouble right now. He tells her that's why he called. Laura suggests that he should find the nearest police station and turn himself in. He offers to make restitution. Laura asks if it means that he's going to give back the money. Pete says that he will, but he wants to know if Laura and Steele will go to bat for him with Ryan. Laura says they might, and Pete says that he needs more than that. Laura says, so will they, and Pete tells her that most of the money is stashed at the factory, but he needs Steele's word that Ryan won't press charges. Laura says Mr. Steele will be in a better position to give him that when they have the money. So kind of back and forth here. Tells her they'll be waiting for him, that he will be waiting for them, and says that they will be there before hanging up. She says that, sorry. Pete then turns to Ryan and tells him they're coming, and Laura hangs up the phone and gets up, going over to the filing cabinet. Mildred senses what she's doing and asks if she's planning on going after that bum on her own. Laura. Hello, hypocrite. Party of one. Come on. She spent the ball like I get it. She felt vulnerable. She saw the injuries. She's trying to like make up for lost time with Steele, and she's worried something's gonna happen. Come on. Like
yeah.
Like, I know why she's doing it, but it doesn't make it a smart decision. It's still dumb.
Yeah.
It's still dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she pulls out the agency gun and loads it, telling Mildred that he wants to make a deal, the money in exchange for his freedom. Mildred tells her that she's going to get her coat. Mildred's coming with her because Mildred's no fool, right?
Yeah.
Laura assures her the gun is a precaution. You rarely take the gun.
Well, at least they know where the gun is. And it's locked up in the file cabinet. But then she goes and drops it in her purse without a holster. I'm sorry. No. That's not quite as bad as stuffing it down in the front of your pants without a holster, but it's not much of an improvement.
To be fair, if you've ever seen the inside of a woman's purse, like you could find anything in there. Like my purse, I don't even know what's in there. Mildred begs her not
there's
to
so
go
many
without...
things that could hang up and put enough pressure on it to, no. Yeah. In a holster. If it's not in a holster, it has no business being loaded. And if it's not loaded, it's no use.
Yeah. Well, they've never been one for gun safety. They should take a course, really.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So Mildred begs her not to go without Steele, but Laura insists that he's had enough excitement for one day. Back at Buckner's mansion, he's reporting the stolen Porsche on the phone, asking why they can't put more men on it, and then asking why they pay their taxes. He says he wants his car and hangs up and begins muttering about the police when Steele and Mulch come in. This is ballsy, walking in like right after they've stolen his car. They've obviously had time to sell it, which I guess, they must have had someone lined up waiting because that was quick. He asks if they have his money, and Mulch pulls out a wad of cash out of his jacket pocket and hands it to him, calling him sir in the process. He counts the money, asks what the extra grand is for, and then Steele says this, grabs him by the shirt and punches him twice, as well as getting a hit on the henchman.
Now, the version that's in the script that we have is much, much different.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It has Remington and Mulch coming in and telling Buckner that he knows where the car is. And let's see. Remington is, Buckner says, well, so you know who stole it? Remington says, I'm sure he'll get his just desserts. And when Buckner asks where the car is, Steele says, well, usually in cases like this, there's a generous reward offered. And Buckner says, okay, I'll knock off today's interest. And Steele says, well, George was thinking more along the lines of 5,500. And Buckner says, well, that's exactly what he owes me. Steele says, isn't that a coincidence?
Yeah,
and then Buckner says, well, just what are you trying to pull? I don't need that car. My insurance will cover the loss. And Remington says, yes, true. But what about all those slips of paper in the glove compartment with all those names and numbers? And Buckner says, this is extortion, Pally. And Steele says, as I understand it, you charge 55 points above the prime rate. Mulch adds, compounded daily. And Steele says, that's extortion. And so Buckner says, okay, we're even. And Mulch says, the Save-On parking lot, 3rd and Vermont. And then Remington says, well, what about me? We even too. And Buckner says, get out of here. And then that's when Steele turns and punches him. And then Steele says, now we're even, Pally. Let's go, George.
I like that. I can only imagine it was cut for time because that kind of makes more sense because, again, like I said, they'd have no time. They would not have enough time to sell that car.
Yeah.
If it's the same day, it's like a few minutes later.
Well, Steele said he had somebody lined up, so it was prepared in advance. He spent some of that time that he was stuck with George on the phone making arrangements for this. But yeah, you're right. It was probably cut for time. And they got the same result. Just
at least he got a good hit in, and then of course. Now they're even, and Mulch tells him, I was behind you the whole way. And Steele's like, sure you were, George.
Yeah. Great comfort, George.
Yeah. We then see Laura pull up to the factory in the Rabbit. She goes inside. That gray jacket does nothing for her. Just saying. That's not a good look. Anyway, in the limo, we see Steele on the phone to Mildred, who is obviously called and told him where she went. Good girl, Mildred. Good girl.
Yeah.
Steele is like just incredulous that she went there alone. And he'd be well within his rights to do hey, wait a minute. Didn't you tell me that we don't do this, separate? Yeah. Mildred insists she tried to stop her, but she can't reach her. Steele hangs up and tells Fred for a day to go to the Courtney doll factory and adding, let's not linger a lot at the lights. So yeah, inside the factory, we see Laura walk into an empty room. The lights suddenly go out. She calls out to Gillespie. We get a bit of cat and mouse here where he pulls out a gun. She pulls out hers, stalks her a bit through the factory, trips at one point to alert her to his presence. He heads towards the main room that she's in. She grabs a kettle and throws it in the middle of the room, then runs in the other direction. He trips, gets her in his sights. He's about to shoot. And then we switch perspectives to the limo, pulling up to the factory, and then Steele can hear 2 gunshots. Calls out her name, he runs inside, and then we see James Ryan standing beside Laura, having shot Gillespie. Steele runs in to see the 2 of them standing there. So, obviously, this is kind of his plan the whole time. Like, set them up, get rid of Gillespie. He takes the fall. Everything's tied up in a neat little bow. Back at the office, Mulch is surprised that Gillespie called Ryan as well. Mildred says he had to eliminate anyone who could finger him. Mulch points out, well, he didn't call me.
Yeah, really.
That should be a sign. Like that should have clued both of them in that something's not right here. Because, yeah, Mulch is part of this too. But Laura gets up, walks over to the other side of the room. As the phone rings, Mildred answers it. Steele walks over to her and asks her what's wrong. She tells him that something's nagging at her. And he teases that he's learned to respect her nags. Laura says that if Gillespie had all of Ryan's money, why not just leave town? Why and try and kill him off when he could leave without a trace? She says another thing. She tells him this is where the age thing comes in. She tells him the 3 men whose name were on the traveler's checks were born 55 years ago and Gillespie was 32. She wonders why he would choose to impersonate older men. And 32 and 55 are a big gap. That's not something that you can easily, fake. Either way, really. I mean, a 55-year-old can't really get away with appearing 32 unless they've had some heavy, reconstructions done. And ditto for a 32-year-old passing, unless they've had some age makeup or whatever. So Mildred hangs up the phone and tells him that was Mrs. Ryan and that she has another job for them. She wants them to find any hidden assets. Mr. Ryan, she is great. She's just she wants them to find any hidden assets Mr. Ryan might have as he just filed for divorce. Rather than sit around and cry about it, she's like, hell no, you're going to do this to me. I'm getting Mr. and Mrs., Mr. Steele and Laura Holt. They're going to take you, I'm not doing this, buddy. Kudos to Mrs. Ryan. This is why I like her character so much in this episode. Mildred laughs and sort of says in an offhand way that Ryan really got a break in all of this. Laura asks how so, and Mildred replies that because he lost everything, he doesn't have to pay his wife 1 penny in alimony in the divorce settlement. Here's my question, though. Wouldn't assets still be divided up like the house?
Yeah. Okay. Unless he put the house up for mortgage, refinance the whole thing, or nearly all of it.
Yeah.
So they no longer owned it. The bank technically does. He got the money. He invested it in the doll company. He embezzled the money. So that's gone. So he's just wiped out the house as an asset.
Well, I mean, she's calling, asking them to find assets. So I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because she's assuming that he still has them in his own name somewhere, or that he's hidden them in bank accounts somewhere else or whatnot. But she's not thinking that he's actually converted it and laundered the money through the doll factory.
No, obviously. But I think if the house had been put up with the doll money, she would know about it because she seems pretty on the ball with like where their finances are. You know what I mean? So I think she'd probably still get the house, and she's obviously looking for other stuff that, that she's going to get too, because he's obviously, that's cold. Like, that is cold.
Yeah, it is.
God, I just so yeah, Laura looks at Steele when Mildred makes this comment, and the penny drops, and Mildred has that moment where she's like, "Oh, I just solved the case." Like one of Mr. Steele's, "I just said the right thing" moments. And this is where I want to talk about Mr. Ryan for a second, because like he's our villain, but he's our villain in like a way that is even more gross than just being your typical like, I'm going to kill to get what I want. Like this is a woman he's been married to for how many years? Like I don't know if they actually say, but like they've gone through all this together. They're about to retire. She seems like a level-headed, decent character. Like she doesn't seem like a character who is greedy or, cheating on him or doing all these horrible things that would lead you to want to get rid of your spouse. This just seems like he's going, okay, I'm about to retire. I don't want to share my money. I want to get rid of the wife. I'm going to dump the baggage and go off and live my life surrounded by women in bikinis and cocktails. Like, what a dick. What a complete and utter jerk.
Yeah.
Like, you work all of that time. I hate this man. I hate this man a lot.
Yeah, there's nothing really likable about him.
Well, no, I mean, some of our villains have been campy enough to be funny, right?
Yeah.
And we've enjoyed them for those reasons. But like this guy,
nothing redeeming.
Wow, that is a really elaborate. And again, obviously, he had to do all this because she's smart enough to know that if she could have seen a divorce coming, she probably would have started putting her ducks in a row too.
Oh yeah,
legally, of course, but like
yeah.
She wouldn't have been caught with her pants down, so to speak. So
yeah,
like. Wow. They go to Mr. Ryan's house. Laura is, and this is interesting. He's killed already. They go there without the police. They do this a lot, actually, to confront the villain. And I think to myself, like, what's going to stop him from she saw him shoot Gillespie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of a dumb move.
Yeah. So
I guess the only rationale for it would be that he probably isn't expecting it, so he might not be prepared to deal with it. Certainly in front of his wife, not prepared to deal with it in front of his wife.
The granddaughter is there at the moment. But yeah, like they go there. Laura accuses him of this being the plan right from the start. Steele adds it went sour when his wife hired them. He points out that he was forced to kill Gillespie to tie up loose ends. Ryan laughs and says that even if that was true, they have no proof. He says traveler's checks in the names of dead men are hardly conclusive evidence. Laura says that he told the police that Pete called him to tell him to come to the factory and ask what time that was. Mr. Ryan says 4:00, but Laura tells him that he's dead wrong. His wife appears in the background and says that the phone had been off the hook all day because Courtney had left it that way, and her parents have been trying to get a hold of them since 1:00. So there's that whole plot line coming back. Mrs. Ryan says she didn't notice it was out of order until 6 or after 6. Laura says they couldn't reach him either, which is why they called his wife. And it's at that point that Courtney comes in looking as adorable as humanly possible, simply to hug his legs and say, "I love you, Grandpa." And I know we're supposed to feel bad for Mr. Ryan here.
You gotta kind of more feel bad for Courtney.
Yeah, I feel awful for this little child who looks up to her grandfather and clearly like adores him. And this guy's a snake. He's just an awful excuse for a person.
In one sense, you do have to feel sorry for Ryan because of what he's thrown away.
Yeah. Well,
he's not smart enough to realize what he's throwing away.
No. And if he were smart and like, if he legitimately just didn't want to be in the marriage anymore, hey, that's fair. If he were smart, he would have said like, I want a divorce and compensated her fairly. And
he would have still walked away with a decent chunk of
Yeah.
cash.
Oh, easily. And not only that, but, you know, he would have walked away with his freedom and the love of his grandchild, who he's not going to see again because he's probably going to be incarcerated forever. Like, what a complete, like, ugh, jerk. So, yeah. But I gotta, again, props to Mrs. Ryan for, you know, keeping calm. Good on you. So we get a scene change. We're back at Steele's apartment. Mildred and Mulch are getting drinks while Steele and Laura set the table. He tells her that when he got the call telling him that she had gone to the doll factory alone, he was upset. She seems surprised, and he adds that she shows how seriously he takes her instructions. And there she was in complete violation of the rule that they work as a team. He says this much more gently than he really needs to. He could totally do I told, like, yeah, he could have really been like, excuse me, this is, no, he's kinder, but maybe he's kind because he knows that if they've thought out a bit, and he's hoping that, later on he'll get that massage with the Ben Gay.
Yeah.
So she starts making excuses, saying, with every rule, there's extenuating circumstances. Sure, Laura, whatever you say. But before they can finish, Mulch interrupts, saying he has his next idea and knows what they can do with the extra cash.
Oh, George.
Oh, no, George. Open mouth, insert foot. Mildred says, what extra cash? And he starts to say, the extra cash from selling Buckner's car. But as he does, Steele makes a cutoff sign with his hand from behind Laura. She asks if there's something he hasn't told her. So he not only did he just lose the moral high ground, he had it like ripped out from underneath. He's now drowning in a lake. Like, he had one brief shining moment where he was, on the moral high ground. It's gone. It is gone. Yeah. So she asks if there's something he hasn't told her. The buzz of the oven bell, or the oven buzzes just in time for him to say, dinner is served. And then it fades. That's the last shot. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on this one?
No. I mean, it's a good episode. It's not a bright and shining star in the what was Steele's phrase in the Hollywood firmament or whatever it was. But I mean, it's a good, solid episode, with the exception of things that I have scolded Jeff on, and I'm sure he will not repeat again.
No, he'll totally, you're 100% on his radar, and he wants to make you happy.
Yeah. Jeff, I'm glad we had this talk.
I have to say, I like this episode more. I have a better appreciation for it now. I as I said before, I wasn't 100% sold on Mulch with Cast and Steele, and I get the impression that I don't love him in the other episode he appears in, but we'll see. I could be wrong on that one, but he's quite endearing in this episode, I have to say. Like,
you gotta love Mulch because he's that combination of a wheedler and a naive sucker.
Yeah. And again, he has some good ideas. They just never seem to go right for him, and you do feel bad for him in that respect. So I have to say that I enjoyed Mulch more than I did possibly before, and I've always liked Callan's portrayal of Martha Ryan in this. She takes what could have been just sort of a boring, here's a client, hiring them, and gives her a little bit of extra intelligence that we don't always get to see from clients. Sometimes they're not all that bright when they come to Steele and Laura. So so I do like that, and of course the thawing of the freeze is much welcomed at this point, because we've talked a lot about how they've been lacking that chemistry and banter in some of the episodes. So with the exception of a few going forward, I'm looking forward to the lack of freeziness. So yeah.
Lack of freeziness. Is that a word?
know it. No, it's not, but I can say it. Shakespeare made up words too. So
well, that's true.
Anyway. So yeah, on the website, www.SteeleWatching.com, we've got show notes, links to Amazon US and Amazon Canada. And you can also look at ways to support us, either one-time donations, or you could sign up to be a subscriber. whichever works for you. We always appreciate it. And other social media resources and links such as?
Well, we've got the SteeleWatching Facebook page. We've got the Twitter. We've got the Instagram. And then we've got the always unofficial but appreciated Steele Watchers fan group.
Yes.
So there you go.
Super fun times are had by all. And
yes, indeed.
The next episode will be the wonderful return of Rocky Sullivan. For those of us who love her, I'm one of them.
For Steele.
I can't. I'm an unapologetic Rocky Sullivan fan, so I like this.
Yeah, unfortunately, the version of this episode that we get has its issues. We're going
to talk about that in depth at a later date.
Yeah.
So
yeah. All right.
Until then, though, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Hey, everybody. Eric and Sara here. Just a quick announcement to let you know that, yes, we do appreciate everyone who listens, participates, and supports the podcast in whatever way you do. But we wanted to give an extra thank you to those who are so graciously giving to be monthly financial supporters.
We are making live streams of our recording sessions available to anyone who is a monthly financial supporter. So not only can you watch us live as we record our podcast episodes, you will be getting access to the raw, behind-the-scenes, unedited version of episodes before they get officially released.
And Sara, does that include our mistakes and screw-ups and our humiliating? Yes,
Every single one of them.
Every single one of them, yes. So again, this is just an extra thank you to those who are going above and beyond. But whether you choose to become a monthly financial supporter or not, we still love you. We want to say we thank you for your support, your encouragement, and your feedback.
If you want to become a monthly financial supporter, please visit our website at www.steelewatching.com to sign up.